The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Any rebroadcast, reproduction, or other use of this broadcast or podcast without the express written consent of Spaced Out Radio or Spaced Out Radio Limited is strictly prohibited. Listener discretion is advised. Are you experienced?
Stop right there!
From high atop the mountains of British Columbia to you listening around the world, this is Spaced Out Radio with host Dave Scott.
They let us play with all our toys. They let us think that we're big boys. They let us make the louder noise, but we're in the world. They let us think we're Superman.
You can follow us on our website, spacedoutradio.com, on iTunes and TuneIn. Follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, on Facebook at Spaced Out Radio Show, or on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show.
Dave, oh Dave, are you playing with Bigfoot and aliens again?
Dad, you gotta stop haunting the ghosts. It's scaring them.
All right, seriously, put down the pointy sticks.
Okay! Game on! Game on! Game on!
The password is...
All right.
Buckle up, space travelers. It's time to go for a ride on Spaced Out Radio. Mr. Bumblefoot, Dave is ready for liftoff.
Seriously, Dave? Really? Aren't you a little old for a tinfoil hat? Hiya! Toby! Bye-bye! Love you! Bye-bye!
Yeah, just please take your seat above us. There will be it's time to take off. Start. 2, 1, boost ignition, and liftoff.
Good evening and welcome to Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. It's great to have you along for the ride on this Thursday, November 23rd, Friday, November 24th. If you're on the East Coast, American friends and listeners, I hope you had a great day and night for Thanksgiving. We are live right here in the Great White North. No Thanksgiving up here. It was a month ago as we are live on Spaced Out Radio out of SOR headquarters here on top of the mountains of British Columbia. Thank you so much for being with us. We are broadcasting on WQEE 99 Rock the Key down in Noonan, Georgia, home of the Walking Dead. We are live as well on the United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM in New Orleans and over 160 countries around the world. Good to have you with us. We are also live at spacedoutradio.com, Spreaker, KTLK, The Fringe FM, Renegade Talk Radio out of Las Vegas, the High Plains Talk Radio Network, and if you're listening in on Revolution Radio, remember the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you, the valued listener. Head on over to freedomslips.com and donate today. Like our music, get your horns up for Mr. Ron Bumblefoot THAL, formerly of Guns N' Roses, currently of Art of Anarchy and Sons of Apollo. Bumblefoot is the official sound of SOR. Now, if you want to follow us on social media, you can do so on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. On Instagram, you can follow me at Dave Scott, SOR. Subscribe to our brand new YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio. No longer Spaced Out Radio Show. We've moved a bunch of the archives over. We're going to be moving some more, so make sure you sign up and subscribe to our brand new channel. We're on iHeartRadio in the United States, TalkStream Live. Tune us in on TuneIn. Download and subscribe to our shows on iTunes. Our website is spacedoutradio.com. Now, we have 2 chat rooms for you to participate in if you want to get your questions in for tonight's guest. You can either be signed into Spreaker or in the SOR Space Travelers group on Facebook. Or if you're on Twitter, just use the hashtag SpacedOutRadio. I will connect with you there as well. If you head to our website, $5 a month, that's all it costs to become a member of the SOR Space Travelers Club. You can shop at our Spaced Out Radio store. Read the Encounter online dealing with everything paranormal, strange, and odd. Read my latest blog, and if you've had an experience you can't explain, fill out an SOR Sightlines report. Or if you're into videos, we have Tim Doyle from UFO Seekers, Leslie Mitchell Clark's Contact TV, and so much more. For the last few weeks, well, since October 11th, we have been talking a lot about musician Tom DeLonge and his To the Stars campaign, which is crowdfunding money to build a spaceship, make movies, documentaries, write books, carry out some scientific studies, including telepathy. However, as you know, if you've been listening to this show, I've been pretty critical about this campaign for a number of reasons. Number 1, DeLonge and his Dream UFO team of former and current government contractors are dodging the media requests, which to me, with my journalism background, is a red flag. 2, with so many heavyweights in the field, why crowdfund? It's not like the people he's surrounded with are hurting for money, because it's going to take billions to create these aggressive projects. And 3, stating that all ETs are evil is like saying all people on this planet are evil. There's many more, but tonight, one of the researchers who's been following this project closely is with us. Grant Cameron, who, in my opinion, is one of the premier, if not the best, researcher in the UFO field today. His website, presidentialufo.com, is a plethora of great information that is accurately sourced, which is hard to find in this field. Grant will tell us what he's learned in hours number 1 and 2. In hour 3, Lorian Fenton, ufologist out of California, will stop by to continue the conversation and get into some of her conference projects as well that she's working on. Grant, thank you so much for joining us on Spaced Out Radio, my friend. How are you?
Just doing super fine.
Well, it's good to have you back on such short notice, and I know a lot of people, Grant, have been really approaching you recently in getting your thoughts on the Tom DeLonge saga. For people who aren't familiar with it, is this an important role to be taken care of as a researcher to try and delve what this former Blink-182 singer is up to?
Oh, I think it's an extremely important story, and I'm glad to see you've actually sort of thought it through. A lot of people just sort of jump on one side or the other and really don't really analyze what's actually going on. It sounds like you've actually analyzed. I think you're sort of pretty close to the facts of what's actually taking place. I wrote the book called Managing Magic, which is the reason I wrote it was because of Tom DeLonge. He had come forward and stated he had all these high-level government officials, and then he talked about the evil aliens, which he talked about. And so, for those two reasons, I decided I was gonna write a book. Number one, to put it in the other side to the evil alien argument, which to show how stupid the whole thing is, and that maybe nobody will read my version of aliens. But I can't let Tom DeLonge put this into a total vacuum. And the other reason I wrote the book was because the Tom DeLonge effort is basically the same thing that's happened for the last 70 years. It's the same story. When I saw it and saw his high-level government officials, I said, I've seen this before. In fact, I've seen this many times before. And I first started writing about this in the 1980s. I was involved with Bill Moore, who is the guy who basically created the Avery. He gave names to all these high-level government intelligence, scientific people. And I was with him, and then I was there when I got the documents for John Alexander with the UFO Working Group. Some of these documents were leaked to me about what was going on inside that group. And then the NIDS group in the 1990s, I was in close contact with the former chief scientist for NIDS. And then Tom DeLonge comes along, and it's the same cycle of people. It's the same people that cycle in and out of these various groups. So absolutely, this is extremely important to realize, number one, that he does have the high-level sources. And most of the sources that people are referring to aren't even close to the number of people. Let me go through, if you've got a minute, let me go through the list of
Please do.
who's actually on his committee, because a lot of these people have sort of disappeared into the shadows, and that's what happens in the UFO community all the time. And the prime example is Chase Brandon, who came forward in 2012, said Roswell was real, it was extraterrestrial, and there were bodies, and he was the second highest level person in the CIA to speak publicly on behalf of the CIA. He came out, made this statement, and just wandered back in the shadows, and everybody let him go there. And nobody's bothered to chase him. Nobody's bothered to confront him as to what he's talking about. So, again, here you have these high-level people, and the number one person, and I can absolutely assure people this is the number one person, no matter what you may hear. The top guy who's running the operation is Jim Semivan. And Jim Semivan is a former CIA briefer for the President of the United States. He is the guy who ran the drone program for President Bush. So he would put on the desk, these are our targets, Bush would sign, and basically he was the guy. And he was the equivalent of a two-star general in the civilian world. So you have the military with their rankings, and in the civilian world you have the same thing. So he was an SES-2, which is basically a two-star general. Very high level, very key guy, and importantly, a briefer for the President of the United States, which I'll tie into later. So Jim Semivan is the guy he approached. I knew about him long before he went public with Tom DeLonge. He didn't contact Tom DeLonge until April of 2016. I knew about him long before that, and then I knew him as the big man in Washington. That was the name that the people I was talking to were referring to him, or my CIA buddy Jim, they would call him. So I knew about him before. And importantly, to remember about Jim Semivan, number one, he's a presidential briefer until 2008. And the other thing you got to realize about Tom DeLonge, or about Jim Semivan, is that he is a UFO experiencer. So you always have these things, it's like evil aliens, and then people will just change the noun and they'll say, oh, it's evil government. The government's all evil, and everybody gets up every morning and tries to figure out how to destroy the world for their children. And that's really not the case either. There's really no evil government. There are just people inside the government who are totally delusional and think that they're saving the world by doing whatever they're doing. But they all think they're saving the world. And Jim Semivan is a guy, and that's where you have to keep in mind that a lot of these people are experiencers. They've interacted with the phenomena, either through their job or through intelligence sources that they've come in contact with. So they've interacted with the phenomena, or they're an experiencer. And Jim Semivan's an experiencer. He had the beings in his room in the 1990s with his wife, and his wife's a psychologist in Washington, D.C., and she is totally freaked out. She's still, I think, a little upset about the whole thing. She was totally freaked out. He was totally mystified by the whole thing, as he wrote a foreword to Tom DeLonge's, one of his books, and said, my concept of reality was shattered when that experience happened. And so he basically had gone to the CIA, and he'd gone to a guy by the name of Dr. Ron Pandolfi, who is the head guy who I believe probably has briefed the last 6 presidents, and maybe the guy who's running the DeLonge operation. He may be running all the operations for disclosure. And he's a very high-level CIA guy, and he went to, so he was the guy, actually, if you look at the Rockefeller briefing documents, there's actually a document there where Scott Jones is talking to him about the fact that Ron Pandolfi got the job when Clinton science advisor, Dr. Jack Gibbons, got an invite from a Rockefeller, and he wanted to talk to him about UFOs. He immediately asked for a CIA briefing on UFOs, trying to get up to speed of what he's going to be dealing with Rockefeller, and the job is given to Dr. Ron Pandolfi. So this is 1993 already. He's the briefer for the White House, and he's been there since 1983 as the head guy. So Jim Semivan, this guy who runs the operation, actually goes to Pandolfi, and Pandolfi has denied this story. But he went to Pandolfi and he said, I had this event happen last night. I need to know what's going on. And Ron said, you're not cleared to know. And what I was told is that Jim Semivan had said to Ron, let me tell you what, Ron, you bring your boss's boss in here and we'll see who doesn't have a need to know. So they brought somebody in to talk to him and said, this is something you really don't want in your career. And the word that I was told is they were told, Jim Semivan was told, pretend this is a one-off, that this will only happen one time and it won't happen again. You don't need this. This is not going to help your career. And so Jim Semivan became quiet. He didn't say anything. You're not allowed to contact anybody in the UFO community if you're operational, if you're CIA operational. So according to what I was told, Jim Semivan didn't contact any of the experiencers. He knew about them. He was one himself. But he was not allowed to contact anybody until after 2008 when he retired. And it was at that point that Ron Pandolfi actually briefed him as to what the story is, what's actually going on, and he becomes operational in this sort of black world CIA UFO program where they're sort of leaking the story and they're talking to people and trying to find out what experiencers know, because that's the whole key. It's consciousness and it's experiencers. So that's what they can't control the phenomena. They don't really know a lot of the answers, so they watch the people who the phenomena affects. So that's why they're very interested in experiencers and what experiencers are told. So that's Jim Semivan. He's the head guy. One of the names, if you're looking at this latest thing, one of the people who isn't really mentioned is John Podesta. And what I pointed out when I talked about this latest operation by Tom DeLonge is that even though Podesta's name is not mentioned, he actually tweets twice. And John Podesta does not tweet very much, but he actually tweeted twice for people to watch this news conference that Tom DeLonge put on. And he's important because he also was a presidential advisor. He was a key advisor to President Obama. So you have a second guy who's actually inside the White House, who's inside the Oval Office. And as you probably know, because I've talked about this numerous times on various webcasts and stuff, that DeLonge contacted John Podesta when he was the campaign manager for Hillary Clinton. And during that point, John said, well, let me get back to you. And he doesn't call him back for 2 months. DeLonge figures he's basically not interested. But I believe what happened is that John went and he started to ask questions. Who's talking to DeLonge? Do I have a role? What are we doing here with this guy? Is somebody in contact with him? And then he gets the approval to actually deal with Tom DeLonge, and 2 months later he contacts DeLonge back and says, I'm ready to play. So that's one of the key guys. The other guys that are on there is this Chris Mellon guy, who is one of these, what would you say, sort of, he's seen the light, because when I talked first about managing magic and this disclosure thing, I was on Coast to Coast with George Knapp. and I talked about it, and Chris Mellon was on the second half of the show with me, and it was during that interview where he said there's not an iota of evidence to support the fact that there is a government cover-up. And now suddenly, here he is like 9 months later, and suddenly it's like, oh, he's talking about the Nimitz, and we should have a congressional investigation, and suddenly he's gone to the other side. So you get this guy who Ron Pandolfi stated to somebody I know, had stated that Chris Mellon has been in the UFO game since the 1990s. And that was also backed up by John Alexander, who had dinner, this would be 2 weeks ago, with somebody who was at the Laughlin conference. And that guy told me that John said, I've known about all these people for 20 years. These people are on the committee. So these are not people who, just as DeLonge puts it out, just so suddenly realized that Tom was a smart guy and we're going to join him and we're going to change our mind about UFOs. These guys have been in this game for a long time. So that's Chris Mellon, this Elizondo guy. What's important about him, he's this head of aerial threats at the Department of Defense, and we get to the evil alien thing. Leslie Kane, who I basically say is almost like an embedded journalist. She's a journalist that John Podesta uses all the time. So you can see that she's actually set up. When this thing goes public, she gets interviews with all the people. She has access. Like you're talking about the fact they're avoiding the media, but they're not avoiding Leslie Kane. Leslie Kane had all these people. The day after Elizondo resigned, she was interviewing him for this project. So she's sort of like the embedded journalist. She's the inside journalist that gets the story. And so you have this guy, and then Leslie asks him, well, are they a threat? Because he's running this aerial threat thing at the Department of Defense, and he says, no, there's no indication that they're a threat, but we really don't know, therefore we have to always consider that a possibility. So here's the deal, that there's no threat to national security. The government has said this for 7 years. There is no threat to national security. It's always been part of their standard thing. Steve Justice is this head Lockheed Skunk Works guy who's worked on all these various programs, which is the bizarre thing that you get these guys, and they're dealing with the most highly classified subject in the United States. It's top secret. And suddenly, the day after they resign from their job, suddenly they're handing out the top secret stuff to the American public. It's a total setup. I mean, it's absolute setup that these guys have been told, okay, you can go out there, you can talk about this, you can talk about that, don't talk about this, don't talk about that. It's an absolute setup that Steve Justice has come out. And the important part about that is that the missing witnesses that I referred to at the beginning is you have this Steve Justice, who is this high-level guy, but there's a higher-level guy, and that was Robert Weiss. In the original John Podesta emails, they reveal that there are 3 high-level officials that are working with Tom DeLonge, and one of them was Robert Weiss, who was the head of Lockheed Skunk Works, way above Justice. And so what happens in this new group is what you see is lower level. So in the first group, you have the general who ran the lab at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base where the bodies should have gone, and then you have the guy who's Assistant Space Command, another general. So you have these high military guys, and then when the news conference thing takes place, you have these lower level guys. Now I refer to like the B team. So you have the A team who have disappeared into the shadows, McCaslin and McKay and Robert Weiss, these the generals in this Robert Weiss, who's a 3-star. He's a SES 3. So these guys have disappeared into the shadows. Nobody knows what happened to them. And these lower-level B-team guys are now on stage with Tom DeLonge. So you can see this is much more complex and it's much more organized than people think. And then you have Putoff, who I've known for many years. And Putoff, I consider to be a good guy. He's a guy who just wants to figure this thing out. He's the guy who ran the CIA remote viewing program. And I've contacted him off and on very shortly to ask questions like, did the president ever get briefed on remote viewing? And he's always basically been open to me. He's very short. He won't write you a long paragraph or anything. He'll just say yes or no or answer your question or whatever. And I've never really bugged him, but I've never really had any problems with him. And then you have the 3 generals that have disappeared. Then you get another name that has come up that shows, again, the very high-level connection to people who've been in this game for a long time. So they mentioned DeLonge mentions Gary Nolan, and Dr. Gary Nolan is at the Stanford University, and he's the guy who analyzed Stephen Greer's little 6-inch alien. He's kind of into the subject, and he's doing a project with Dr. Kit Green, and he's also been linked into Tom DeLonge. And Kit Green, no matter what you want to say about anybody in the CIA, Kit Green is a straight shooter. I mean, he's very sort of open. He's like an open employee. He's allowed to talk about the subject. He was the guy who ran the Weir desk, or the CIA UFO desk at the CIA before Ron Pandolfi. He ran it from 1969 to 1983. Then Ron Pandolfi took it over, and he's run it ever since. So Kit Green and Nolan are actually doing experiments, and I keep pointing out to people, this is an important subject. They're doing experiments with very high-level psychic people. Edgar, Uri Geller, Ingo Swann, Joe McMoneagle, all these people that they have their DNA, and they put them in MRI machines. And so what they're doing is they're looking at, is there anything significant about very highly psychic people? And they're also, the other group that they're working on is experiencers, people who've been injured in sort of UFO incidents, like people who have interacted with the aliens. And from what I heard, first I heard 2 years ago they had 50 people. Then I heard 100. Now I've heard over 100. And they've actually interacted not only with Tom DeLonge, but they've actually leaked this story to Annie Jacobson, who wrote the book Area 51, and she just wrote the book called Phenomena. So this is a story about the fact that, from what I'm told by one of the people who went through the program, is that every experiencer and every highly psychic person has a DNA marker that is there from birth. It's the same marker, and they have this marker. And if you hear Nolan talking about it, Nolan will say that all your DNA records everything. It'll record every cold you've had, every flu you've got. You can actually read it like a playbook as you go back into the DNA. So these two guys are linked in there. So you have this Kit Green, who is a very high-level guy who's a contractor to the CIA and he's worked on a lot of psychic programs, like what they wanted to do with a guy from the Chinese Academy of Sciences. They wanted to put two people in MRI machines, one in China, one in the United States, and they would do the telepathy experiment. And what they wanted to do is see whether the receiver and the sender, whether the message was instantaneously received. And this goes down to what may be the bottom line of the whole UFO phenomena, and that is non-local consciousness. Is consciousness non-local? Is it bounded by time and space? So they would see if this message went instantly. So you got Kit Green involved in this project, but not above board. But I'm actually trying to get some people to interview him, because he seems to want to talk about this story of this thing. And the other thing that they discovered, which is really important to the story I'm working on right now, is that they say that they have a brain pattern, that all highly psychic people and all experiencers have a brain pattern which Nolan referred to as an antenna. So I asked one of the people I'd known had gone through the program, and I said, did they ever use the word antenna with you? And he went, there's a long silence, and it's like, yeah, they used the word. So they know this thing. It's a sender receiver. We're all senders and receivers. And like music, some people are really good at it, and some people just, have taken lessons. And so that's the one. And then they have this Norm Kahn, CIA, an expert on national security, is on the team. Most people don't know that. Colm Kelleher, who worked on with Bigelow, with NIDS on the cattle mutilation. They did a book on the cattle mutilation thing. And Dr. Adele Gilpin. And these people, again, all have connection to the CIA. They actually have another doctor, by Dr. Paul Rapp, who's a brain function and consciousness consultant who works for the CIA. So you have all these connections going back to the CIA, and so it's a program that people would say it's a disinformation program, and I keep maintaining to people they don't understand how this works. It's not a disinformation program, because if they wanted to cover this thing up, they would just shut up and quit talking about it. If you go to Canada or Britain or Switzerland or any other country in the world except for the United States of America, nobody knows anything that the government's doing about UFOs, because the government doesn't talk about it. It's only in the United States of America where there's leaks and there's whistleblowers and there's people like what's happening here with Tom DeLonge coming forward. So what they're doing is they're doing a gradual acclimatization, or what Bigelow calls confirmation. They're basically raising consciousness of people, and they've done it over and over again. That's what I'm saying. This is nothing new. They've done this over and over again. And one of the biggest things, and then I'll let you ask questions, the biggest things that people mistake on the Tom DeLonge thing is, and this was put out by Leslie Kane in her article, is that Tom was so good at putting these guys together and working with these guys. Nothing could be farther from the truth. Tom DeLonge had nothing to do with putting this group together. Nothing whatsoever. All he did was contact one guy and asked him, does your uncle or whoever it was talk about UFOs? Oh, yeah. And he gets an invite to Lockheed Skunk Works, to a barbecue. And he's told to do an introduction to the president, and he says, if I do that introduction, I'd like to talk to the guy for 5 minutes. He talks, he gives his cargo cult theory about the evil aliens and how we should, swat them out of the sky like bugs. And they basically say, okay, we got someone for you to talk to. They send it to the CIA sends him to NASA sends him to the West Coast. He gets in contact with generals, and basically he goes from person to person to person, and they set up the group for him. He had nothing to do with it. He may have been well-intentioned in using those people and in trying to get the message out. But in terms of the fact that he set up absolutely nothing, it's the same as Bill Moore. It's like Bill Moore in 1980. Bill Moore he becomes famous because he wrote the Roswell book, and he had a big audience. The same as Tom DeLonge has this massive audience of young kids where they want to get the message. They want to get some messages. They want to control the message. They want to get it through to them. And so Bill Moore in the 1980s had a big audience because he had the number one selling UFO book of all time. So this was the Roswell incident. Before the Roswell incident, nobody had ever heard of Roswell. Nobody, it was totally unknown. And he brought this book out, and suddenly it was a big book. I think it sold over 1 million copies. He goes on the book tour, and that's when they may contact him and they say, you're the only guy who knows what you're talking about. And Bill heard that twice, and Bill believed that. Same as Tom DeLonge believes he's the only guy who knows what he's talking about. Same as Stephen Greer believes he's the only guy who knows what he's talking about. And what I say is that's how they set these people up. And it's not that they're using these guys, they're manipulating these or putting false information. They're using these guys to control the message. And in your third hour, you got Lorian on, and she and I had a meeting 2 weeks ago in Laughlin, and maybe I'll stick around for a couple minutes and we'll talk about this. And they contacted me. She has, I don't know if we'll talk to her whether she wants to sort of expose who we had the meeting with, but they contacted me and said, we need to talk to you. So I went down with Lorian and a couple other women, and somebody has done the same thing as me. I've worked on this story for 30 years about the fact that the government is gradually leaking this story, and they surround it with disinformation, and they leak certain pieces of the puzzle, and almost everything that we believe has been leaked. It's all been leaked by the government, and the way they control it is to keep the disinformation and put it through really bad sources so everybody says, oh, it's a hoax, or nobody wants to believe it or whatever, and the story gets out. So Lorian and I had this meeting, and the person that we may openly talk about said, I've been working on this for 25 years, and she was giving out my webinar where I described what happened to Tom DeLonge and told people, this is your homework, this guy has got it on. And so she gave me 80 pages of notes, and Lorian and I, we had Lorian wanted to do an interview. So we're in a hotel room, and there's part of the interview that she's going to release for her conference in March. And I and this other person are going to speak at this conference, and we're going to get into this whole thing about how does counterintelligence work, who's inside the UFO community that's actually working for the other side. And they actually named, I knew some of them, and they actually named some new people. So part of the meeting we had in my hotel room was to discuss, number one, something we could discuss in public. And so Lorian and I can talk about that tonight. But there was another part where it was off the record. And whether that tape will ever be made public, we don't know. But she's dealing with the same people. So there's a whole bunch of these Avery names, and their people have dealt with them. I've dealt with them, and we're all talking the same thing. And we're singing from the same hymnal. I can guarantee you we know who's behind this thing and what they're doing. And what I was told by Lorian's friend is that the way it works is that these people who, some of them were my friends, and I said, okay, I mean, they're my friends. If they go public with it, I will expose this. That these are my friends, and yes, they're on the inside. And what they were told was that we are here to spin the story. So you don't want the story coming out clean. That's the whole idea. That's why you surround it with disinformation. Because if it comes out clean, you lose control of the story. And then suddenly it's like, stock market melts down. Who knows what's going to happen? So they want the story to come out sort of indirectly. So they're there to spin the story. And when it gets close to classified material, to move it away from the classified material. Now that's something that Lorian's source, who was in the room with me, said, and that's exactly what I've been saying. It's just this person actually talked to people face to face and got a number of high level people to actually confirm that this is how it works. I've been saying it based upon just logical assumptions and the people that I've interacted with. And maybe at the conference in San Jose in March, we may actually do some lectures where you're actually going to know exactly who they were and exactly what they said.
Well, I am planning my trip to go down there because Lorian's asked me to speak at that event as well, Grant. So I'm hoping that I can get down there for that, because I think after all the time you have spent coming on this show, I owe you a beer or something along those lines, something Canadian like that. But explain to my audience, if you don't mind, Grant, why Tom DeLonge feels he is the mastermind behind this project. Are they letting him think that, or is he just the front man?
Oh, absolutely. That's what when I wrote the book Managing Magic, I talked about the 14 magicians. So what I say is the phenomena is not UFOs. The phenomena is phenomenology. It's remote viewing, it's psychic phenomena, it's precognition, it's consciousness, it's UFOs, it's ghosts, it's near-death experiences, it's all that stuff. It's the whole idea that non-local consciousness is the ground of being. So when these guys look at this whole phenomena, they're looking at it not from a UFO perspective, but this sort of very complex thing. So that's why I call it managing magic. It's not managing UFOs. It's all these other phenomena that are all connected to it. And so you have these 14 magicians, and most of them are CIA people, and I name a lot of these people who are, it's part of their job to leak the story. You can't have people back in 1947. You've got to leak the story. You've got to acclimatize people. That's what the Brookings Institute report said in the early 1960s. You've got to bring people up to speed. You've got to do it slowly. And so that's what they're doing. And so these 14 magicians are handing out stuff. But what you need in terms of, on the other end, is you need messiahs or puppets. And Tom DeLonge actually made a statement, and I didn't realize this 2 months ago, that he was actually right. What he said is the reason that they use people like him is because they can't go on TV. And I'm going, the guy's right. They're absolutely right. You can't, if you're going to do disclosure, gradual disclosure, you cannot put the president in a news conference. You cannot put the CIA director out there. They can't go on camera because that's full disclosure. Once you get those guys start talking about UFOs, it all unravels. So what you do is you use the puppet thing. So you use, or Messiah. So you have the 5 messiahs, and they're all the same thing. So you have Dan Smith is one. You have Stephen Greer as one. You have Tom DeLonge as one. You have Bill Moore, and they all have a very common characteristic, is they have massive egos. They think that they've got it all figured out, and so that's what you need. Is you need these guys who think that they've got it figured out, and then they have this trust. So we're here. You're the only guy who knows what you're talking about. This is the Bill Moore thing. You're the only guy who knows what you're talking about, and we're here to help you. And we're going to give you all the top secrets, and everybody buys it. Oh, because I'm so smart. That's what Tom DeLonge said. The reason they dealt with him is because he had it figured out. Well, give your head a shake. Come on. It's because what he'll say, and you know that they're not really telling him everything that's going on, because number one, you have Stephen Greer, who believes he knows everything. He's got it all figured out. He's the only guy who knows what he's talking about. And he says all the aliens are good. Then you get Tom DeLonge, who says all the aliens are bad. And they both claim to be talking to the same people, which means that the government isn't really talking to them about aliens, good or bad. They're just feeding them whatever they need to feed them and letting them think whatever they want. They're really not giving them sort of the true goods, because they may not even know as to what they're dealing with. That's what Jim Semivan said. He said, how do you define something where there does not appear to be any there? We are talking about a phenomena that appears to be consciousness or multidimensional that is way beyond our present science. So it indicates that they really don't have that many answers, and yet you still have Stephen Greer and Tom DeLonge claiming exactly the opposite things, and both claiming that they have it all figured out and that the government is telling them this. I do not believe the government's telling. They're managing these people to get out a story. So Stephen Greer he's got an audience that he's able to reach. They want to put that audience, and we actually confirmed this. Ron Pandolfi's wife was having these go-to meetings. They haven't had one for quite a while, but they were having these go-to meetings where they were talking about portals and stuff. And I would invite people on, and I said, this is the wife of the guy who's running the program. You should sit down and watch this thing, and you can ask whatever questions. So I talked to a guy by the name of Sid Goldberg. He's a producer for Gaia, to come on. And we had heard a story that after the documentary Sirius, that Stephen Greer was in Los Angeles at the premiere, and a source that was one of the people who was an advisor to the movie told us, and we all heard this. There was about 6 or 7 people in the room. Said that Stephen said, "Now I got to." He was all angry, and he said, "Now I got to go back to Washington, and I got to talk to Ron at the UFO desk." And it's like, what? He's talking to Ron Pandolfi? And I know Ron he's talked to at least 24 UFO people. He's, giving people stuff or leak stuff or talk to them or whatever you want to call it. And so when I heard Stephen Greer's name, so Sid Goldberg actually went on one of these go-to meetings. And the way it works is Dan Smith, who's one of the puppets or one of the messiahs, he's there with Ron Pandolfi's wife, and they're running this meeting. But Ron Pandolfi's there, but he's sitting in the room, and he's not on camera or anything, because it's always plausible deniability. He'll deny everything that he ever said. He sits in the background and sort of, he's the puppet master, and he's got all these puppets that are doing what he tells them to do. So he's sitting in the background, and so Sid Goldberg says, does Stephen Greer vet his material through Ron Pandolfi? Or does he vet his stories through Ron Pandolfi? And you can hear Ron in the background. He says, "What stories?" So Sid repeats the question. He doesn't fall for it. He repeats the question. He says, "Does Stephen Greer vet his material through Ron Pandolfi?" And then there's this about 10-second silence, and somebody says, "I think you just got your answer." And this is the thing: is that you think that these guys are. They're figuring this stuff out, but they're not. They're leaking material, and there's no way you can avoid it. Because if you suddenly, say, Dave, you suddenly get a big lead and you get on the inside of the government, the way that they throw you off, you may have a legitimate story. The way they throw you off is they send other people to you to tell you opposite things that you're believing. And that's all the government wants to do. That's how they keep the story at a point where they're going to just acclimatize you rather than blow the cover up. And what they do is they just throw mud in the water. So they have 2 different stories going at the same time, so that you tell one story, I tell another story, and next thing you know, you and me are fighting about what the date was. I know you're lying and I'm lying, and the fight gets on in the UFO community. You have a lot of that, and a lot of that, I believe, is because they're feeding different stories to different people to keep everybody off balance. And yet the basic core of the story, what's called, like Hal Puthoff, for example, who's one of Tom DeLonge's guys, he's famous for being part of what was called the core story. He and Kit Green, who also is on the Tom DeLonge team, and Jacques Vallée met in a Denny's restaurant. This is a very famous story. 1987, they meet in a Denny's restaurant. And they are like you and I. They're trying to figure out what's going on. They don't have all the answers. I mean, they have a little bit of the story. They may have talked to somebody inside the government who they trusted, who told them this is for real. And so what they wanted with the core story is to try to determine, what do we know for sure? What do we absolutely know is for real on this thing? And what they come up with is what's called the core story. And you'll hear it from time to time in the UFO community. The core story. The core story is extraterrestrials have been here at least once, and that there has been a crash, and that we have done some sort of back engineering, but it's not going very well. That's called the core story. The rest of it, we really don't know. This we know for sure. And so you get these guys who are linked into the thing, who know, and the reason I believe all these guys are part of the program is because they're trying to figure it out as well. So if you could get inside the Tom DeLonge team and actually interact with all these guys, you could find out a lot of stuff. So that's why they're there, because they know that all these other high-level guys are there, and they're just trying to figure it out. And at one point, I had leaked some of the stuff they had told me, and I sort of got cut off. This is going back probably 20 years. I got cut off. And basically the way I coined it, to the person who got angry at me for leaking it, was, well, this is like MJ-12 too. I mean, you're going to get 12 guys on the outside who are going to figure this thing out, but it's not going to help anybody because they're not telling anybody either. There may be some high-level CIA guy who is very interested. It's like collecting wild game animals. I mean, the only people who are going to know what kind of animals you killed are the people in your MJ-12 group. They're never going to tell anybody. And so that's what these guys are. They're guys who are very interested in the subject or who are experiencers who are inside. And Tom DeLonge thinks he's running the show, that they came to him. Absolutely not true. They set up Tom DeLonge. They are feeding him material. But again, it's not bad. It's not bad material. It's half true, half false material, and they've done it over and over again. That's Magic. I just go year after year after year through Managing Magic, and you see they've done this almost every year since 1947.
Grant, one of the concerns I have brought up numerous times on this program is on October 11th, when there was this press conference, the first thing I did afterwards was I immediately went to the campaign, found their press guy, and submitted a press request. Now, outside of George Knapp, Jimmy Church, Leslie Keane, and Linda Moulton Howe, they have not responded to anybody's requests regarding media interviews. I don't know if it's any other show, but I know this one has never received a message back. Now, as someone who has spent 10 years in the media, in the mainstream, the one thing that I know is if certain reporters are getting information after a conference and they are ignoring other reporters, that's a red flag to me.
Why? They're spinning it, sure. Oh, absolutely.
Why are they dodging the media?
Well, they're controlling the story. So they're using, well, it's almost like the thing of embedded journalists. So you're going to people that will tell the story the way you want them to tell it. That's the same way, and there's actually a video that he altered. And I may take credit for this. I mean, it may be because I hammered him so bad about this evil alien thing. There's a video. I could actually send it to you. There's a famous video that he does where he talks about the 3 things that he learned, and it was like there's things that should never have been classified, and 2 and 3. And in the third one, he uses this word. They discovered things that were so threatening and something else that they decided this could never, ever be made true. And they actually changed that video and took the word threatening out. So we've got both versions of the video where they alter the video. So they're spinning this story. That's why they came out with the whole thing about raising the money to build it. It's almost like the Stephen Greer did the same thing. It's sort of like, the government's got the secrets, so we've got to build it ourselves, and everybody send us money, and we're going to put it out there, and we're going to put it in the open, and it's going to be open source material, and we're going to help the world. Because that's the way you have to spin the story. It's being controlled by Jim Semivan, and what you want is this soft sort of disclosure, very well controlled. For example, Tom DeLonge tweeted. It was a tweet. Yeah, it was a tweet. Maybe the day after, he said every word that was in that broadcast was carefully planned for 6 months. So you have this guy like Elizondo who retires the day before, and they've already got his speech written for him. This is horribly controlled, and it's the old thing where we're going to save the world, we're going to bring out this technology, and it's this soft spin of trying to almost go back to 1947 and start over, where you get some guy who comes out and says, yes, I were in the Defense Department, yes, there are UFOs, and they've taken all the evil alien stuff out of it, and they're running that thing. But they don't want to go to media who are going to challenge them, and maybe they anticipate you're going to challenge them. So they're going to media that are sympathetic to them. And I think Tom had come out and said they'd gotten lots of requests, but they weren't. How did he put it? They weren't allowed to at this point, and he seemed to indicate it had to do with the company, but that's not true. This is a very carefully managed story. They're only going to allow certain people to interview them, and it's just to control the story. They don't want to have someone like you or me who's going to expose something they don't want exposed, and all this work goes down in the drain. Because I've known about this project, and I've talked about it for 2 years, that they were going to do this. The only thing that caught me by surprise was this thing about raising money for, we're going to build a flying saucer nonsense. But the rest of it I knew. I had people inside. I knew they were going to do all this sort of stuff, and that they were trying to go with Steven Spielberg, and they lost the Steven Spielberg thing. So it hasn't gone as well as they thought. But you got to remember, it's almost like when I did the webinar on it, I said it's almost like the documentary was done in 1988 called UFO Cover-Up Live, where everybody had to read from cue cards, and the people on the show are furious. I mean, this is my story, and they're making me read my story off a cue card and stuff like that. It's a CI deal. It's carefully managed. Every word is completely planned, so they're not gonna jeopardize it by giving you an interview where you're going to go off script. They want this thing on script as long as they can get it on script. And that's the sad part about the whole thing, is where I say, like, why has nobody gone after Chase Brandon? Why did nobody go after Robert Weiss? Why did nobody go after McCaslin? Why did nobody go after all these people that are out there? It's like they can sort of throw this stuff out, and they know nobody's going to actually do an interview. Nobody's actually going to go after these sort of people and try to confirm this stuff. These are some of the highest level people that have ever been out there, and there's just nothing happening. They are controlling this story.
Mm-hmm. What is George Knapp's role in this? Because for so long, ever since the Bob Lazar story, the public who listens to the alternative and fringe media has had a real love-in with the journalism that George Knapp has created for himself. And I have to say, I'm one of those guys as well, where he seems to tell a story down the middle. But all of a sudden, he's got DeLonge in his back pocket, or maybe vice versa, and now we're hearing rumors that he has actually bought stock in the To the Stars Academy, which now takes the biasness of his stories to another level.
Well, if he's bought stock in that thing, because he couldn't possibly believe they're going to build a flying saucer. George, he may have some reservations, but I don't think he would ever be public with it. He's done 3 major interviews with DeLonge, and he knows a lot of the inside people. Like, for example, Bigelow, I heard, is involved. He's very good friends with Bigelow. John Alexander was in the group, and then I think he sort of pulled out. He's very close friends with John Alexander, so he knows a lot of people, and I think it would be that he doesn't really want to offend all the people that he knows. He would know all those people, everybody in that group. He would know majority of those people, and if he suddenly takes a position against DeLonge, he loses all these people talking to him. That would be my position. I like George a lot, and I've done lots of interviews with him. But you got to remember that he does have a lot of very close people in this inside this thing, and he also wrote like Tom DeLonge is publishing Bob Lazar's autobiography, and George Knapp is writing the foreword to it. So there's a lot of connections, and yet I don't think he interviewed Tom DeLonge after either. I don't think he's. I think as far as I know,
he passed it off to Jimmy Church. That's what I do know.
Okay. I mean, after the news conference.
After the news conference. These are the only people that I know, as we only got about 4 minutes here before we have to go to break. The people that I know who have interviewed DeLonge are George Knapp previous, and that's when I heard that he had bought stock in it. Now, I'm taking it secondhand information here.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's why Jimmy Church, with the Coast to Coast connection, got the opportunity to interview DeLonge. There's Leslie Kean, Linda Moulton Howe, and recently Joe Rogan. But I don't think Joe Rogan has anything to do with this either. And Joe was a little rough on Tom in his Joe Rogan Experience podcast about it.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if Linda, I think they interviewed one of his co-authors, like Lavinda or these people. Because Linda told me the story. It's not really public, but Linda told me the story that she was contacted by Tom DeLonge, and she was coming to me. Why is Tom DeLonge not talking to me anymore? Because he sort of had her as the inside. We're gonna because she has all the ancient, the Sumerians and all that stuff, and he had a long deal with her that she was going to be on the inside and all this sort of stuff. And then he wouldn't confirm or talk to her anymore. And she was asking me, why is he cut me off? What's happened and stuff like that? And I'm going, I don't know. So I'm not sure that Linda has a connection. They may have a connection to some of the co-authors, like Lavinda and the other guy. But from what she told me, she was sort of cut out as well. And so to me, it's just managing the story. That's what people have to remember. This is so carefully managed how they're doing this thing. This is not run by Tom DeLonge. Let me guarantee you. He is saluting and doing what he's told. It is the CI people. And now they're talking about this new release within 3 weeks from, I think the announcement was November 18th, 3 weeks, and the announcement is going to be made by somebody else, not Tom DeLonge. So one of the people is going to come forward. So they've got all this sort of stuff planned down the road, and Tom DeLonge is absolutely just a puppet. He thinks he's running the show, but he's not. And these other guys are basically leaking this material out. And it's only one of 6 teams that I believe are actually in operation. There's 6 different disclosure teams. Tom DeLonge is just one of the ones that's operating at the present time.
We got about 90 seconds here, Grant, before we got to head to break. Do you think Tom truly knows what a pawn he is, in your opinion?
Oh, he's actually said he is. He's the one that made the comment that was very true and sort of woke me up, where he said the reason they need me is because they can't go on camera. And so he believes they're telling him the truth. That's the big difference. He believes that they've bought his argument that this is evil aliens and that he's got it all figured out. That's I think where he's making the sort of the mistake, where he's this super smart guy, and because he even tells a story. He starts, I think, on Jimmy Church show. He tells a story where he starts with Stephen Greer, who's the good alien guy, and so now you hear these two guys talking about each other, and they're both accusing each other of being disinformation pawns for the U.S. government, but they both still believe that their guys are telling them the truth, and when in fact it's quite clear that everybody's being manipulated. Even I was offered a position. I was offered an in on this thing, and I turned it down. They want to sort of control or manage the story for whoever's coming out. And if you get something, you'll probably be contacted too to try to help you and at the same time manage the story that they want you to spin it, because they can't stop you from doing a story. So either they kill you or they manage how you put the story out.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't like the one option. I'll be honest there, my friend. I don't like the one option, but, that is something that we will have to dodge at another time. Grant, we got you for one more hour tonight. I'm so thankful that you were here. I've wanted to do this story with you ever since it found out, because like I said to our audience, and I've said many a time before, and I'm not just saying because you're on the air with us, but I think you're the premier, most respected and number one researcher when it comes to the field of ufology, my friend. So thank you for being with us here again tonight. I'm going to get you to hold on. We are going to have one more hour with Grant Cameron. PresidentialUFO.com is his website. I highly suggest you check it out. But after the show, and in hour number 3, Lorian Fenton from the Fenton Perspective is going to join us as well as we continue the UFO talk and Tom DeLonge tonight on SOR. We'll be right back.
365 days a year, we're in the field, investigating UFO sightings, talking to alien abductees, and visiting secret military locations like Area 51. We're UFO Seekers, official partner of Spaced Out Radio. Follow our daily search for the truth at ufoseekers.com or like us on social media. Catch us on Spaced Out Radio every third Monday of the month as we discuss Area 51, UFOs, and more. And also, don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube.
From coast to coast to coast, Blacklight Uncharted is taking on the paranormal across Canada. From ghostly hauntings to the UFOs flying above in conjunction with MUFON Canada, we're closely investigating what's going on in the northern skies and checking out the apparitions that walk among us. Check out our videos right here at spacedoutradio.com. We want to know your thoughts, we want to hear your experiences, and we want you to share your stories. The answers are out there, and we intend to find them.
Would you like to become one of our space travelers? All you have to do is click on the Space Travelers icon at spacedoutradio.com. For only $5 a month, you can get access to some great prizes, as well as private monthly shows, newsletters, and a members-only section on our website. Become a space traveler today.
It's paranormal news at its finest. Welcome to The Encounter. At spacedoutradio.com, The Encounter online is SOR's trusted news source for everything weird and strange going on around the world. This is news editor Eric Markham. Our team of journalists are scouring the planet for those strange stories that rarely make the mainstream. No fear-mongering or fake news here. Head over to spacedoutradio.com and encounter The Encounter.
Want to learn more about aliens, cover-ups, conspiracies, cryptids, and the paranormal? All you have to do is tune in S4 as we take over the Spaced Out Radio night, starting at midnight Pacific, 3 a.m. Eastern, each and every Saturday night, right after Spaced Out Saturdays. Hi there, This is Eric Cooper from Forest Moon Paranormal. Join me, Corey Ruiz, and friends as we discuss the hot topics of the night. It's fun, entertaining, and as dark as the night. Find us at spacedoutradio.com.
Hey, this is Canadian Paranormal Investigator Mike Moore. The third Wednesday of every month, I'll be teaming up with Dave Scott to bring you Ghosts of the Great White North. Each month, we will bring on guests from across Canada to discuss their ghostly encounters. Canada is a paranormal hotbed with stories you've never heard, so we're going to bring them to you. So get comfy on your Chesterfield, grab a donut, and join us, eh?
Are you an experiencer? Have you had run-ins with strange creatures you can't explain? ETs, Dogman, Bigfoot, werewolves? They're enough to scare the daylights out of anyone. Hi there, I'm Butch Witkowski from Euphoria Cop. And on the last Monday of every month, you can listen to me and the host, Dave Scott, talk about the weird and the strange being reported on Spaced Out Radio. I'm going to bring my investigations and sources, you bring your experiences, and we'll figure out the rest together. Strange Days on Spaced Out Radio. Come tune us in at spacedoutradio.com.
Want a place to share your experiences without feeling judged? We have the place for you. If you've experienced sightings or contact with ETs, ghosts, cryptids, or UFOs, and you'd like someone to confidentially look into the matter, just fill out an SOR Sightlines report. Our goal is to help you get the answers you need to the experiences you've had with our professional team of researchers. Your information stays 100% confidential. The SOR Sightlines report. Fill out your experience today only at spacedoutradio.com.
Psychic Sundays, spiritual communication, ET contact, Sasquatch in your backyard. We will have it all on Cosmic Passport with me, Elizabeth Anglin. Each Sunday, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, at spacedoutradio.com, I will take you on a journey of enlightenment. The goal is learning from the soul on out. We'd love it if you joined our experience. Cosmic Passport, heard Sundays at spacedoutradio.com.
Are you interested in advertising on Spaced Out Radio? Head to our website at spacedoutradio.com and click on our advertising tab. There, you will find an assortment of ways you can get your product out there with us, from radio commercials to banners and social media. Have a product you like our hosts to endorse? We can do that too. Visit spacedoutradio.com for more details.
From British Columbia to Northern California, Pacific North Weird has Cascadia covered. Check out our feature videos at spacedoutradio.com, where I, Vincent Zunza, and my super sleuth partner Alexandra Sullivan track down the weird and strange stories from around the Pacific Northwest. From Bigfoot to Mel's Hole and everything in between. This is what makes life exciting. So why report the normal when we can report the Pacific North Weird? Right here at spacedoutradio.com.
Don't have time to listen to Spaced Out Radio live? Wherever you are, the car, the office, the shower, or even if you're traveling, we're right here for you. Each Spaced Out Radio show can be found on iTunes, TuneIn, and on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. It's the perfect way for you to catch up on our shows. For more information, just head over to our website, spacedoutradio.com, and tune in to us today.
Welcome to Spaced Out Saturdays with me, Dave Cruz from Beyond the Strange. Our weekly feature on spacedoutradio.com will take you around the world discussing everything from the paranormal to the latest conspiracies from the top guests in their fields. We won't leave any story uncovered. Spaced Out Saturdays at spacedoutradio.com starting 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern.
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Would you like to connect with us? Head to spacedoutradio.com for all your latest show info. And hit us up on Twitter using the hashtag Spaced Out Radio. Now, back to Dave Scott and SOR.
Welcome back to the second hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. Great to have you with us. Tomorrow night on the program, it's the final Friday of the month, which means I bring in my friends, and we do the SOR Paranormal Roundtable looking at the month that was in the weird, the strange, and the obtuse. We get going at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time at spacedoutradio.com. We want to welcome in everyone listening in on WQEE 99 Rock the Key down in Noonan, Georgia, home of the Walking Dead. We are live as well on the United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM in New Orleans, and over 160 countries around the world. Good to have you with us. We are also live on KTLK, thefringe.fm, Renegade Talk Radio out of Las Vegas, and if you're listening in on Revolution Radio, remember the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you, the valued listener. Head on over to freedomslips.com and donate today. Bill Cardwell has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Usage... What the hell is this, Bill? Usage Easter? Usage Aster? Usage Aster. Let's try that one. Anyways, Bill sets the password each and every night, right here on the mighty SOR. Now, if you want to follow us on social media, you can do so on Twitter, at Spaced Out Radio. Use the hashtag Spaced Out Radio if you want to connect live with me during the show. As well, you can also give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. You can follow us on Facebook as well if you want to go to our live chat in the SOR Space Travelers group. You can also follow me on Instagram, Dave Scott, SOR. We are also having a brand new YouTube channel called Spaced Out Radio. No longer Spaced Out Radio Show, so make sure you unsubscribe from the old one, subscribe up to the new one. We would appreciate that. We're on iHeartRadio in the United States, TalkStream Live. Tune us in on TuneIn, download and subscribe to our shows on iTunes. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including joining the SOR Space Travelers Club for $5 a month. Rock out to some Bumblefoot. Shop at our Spaced Out Radio store. We also have great articles on things that are happening around the world on The Encounter Online, and you can watch great videos from UFO seekers and Contact TV and so much more at spacedoutradio.com. For the next hour, we have Grant Cameron from presidentialufo.com. And to me, once again, I am going to preface this, I think he is the number one guy in the field of ufology when it comes to research and getting the real truth as to what is behind these stories that are being covered up. Grant, thank you so much for being with us. Really appreciate your time.
Well, thanks, and thanks for your kind words. I'll have to buy you a beer when we get to San Jose.
Well, I look forward to that, my friend. I totally look forward to that.
There you go.
And trust me, the round will be reciprocated. You know, usually it's Fireball or tequila with Old Davy here, but that's okay.
There you go.
That's okay. I hope you don't mind. Now, Grant, there's so much going on with this field. I want to start off with a quick question from one of our listeners, Joe, in the SOR Space Travelers. And he is asking, all the UFO experts are always labeling all of the other experts as government disinformation specialists. Who is the public supposed to believe?
My personal opinion is that everybody's trying to save the world, and you don't know who to believe because that's the way the government set it up. Is everybody's off edge. That's why I said they feed two different stories to do two different people. I just go based upon my own that. I think I'm saving the world. I think everybody thinks they're saving the world. There's even an incident occurred today where I think that counterintelligence is using a lot of researchers, especially there's an incident that happened today. I don't know how much I want to describe it. An event happened in 2014. There was a bunch of reporters there. There were 6 objects. Thing went for 6 hours, and one of the videos was released. And they go after the guy who's running the event. His name is Sixto Paz Wells. And the whole thing was Sixto Paz Wells had nothing to do with the video. It was a 30-second video, and somebody put up and said, oh, this is a half a balloon or something. It was like, are you kidding me? I mean, like the rest of the story was totally ignored. And so I think a lot of U.S. counterintelligence is using people who don't even know they're being used. Like people, especially people who are skeptical, because that's basically the government's position. They want to cover, kill stories. So what they can simply do in order to kill a story is that they'll go to a Facebook site where people are playing this game. We're smart guys. We're going to expose hoaxes, and they basically just look at videos and say, "This one's a balloon. This one's a hoax. This one's a kite. This one's this. This one's that." And it's almost like the Russians, where the Russians maybe get an idea that the Trump campaign is sympathetic, and they start inundating them with all sorts of material, trying to manipulate them. So I think a lot of the problem is that they're feeding stuff to people who don't even know they're being used, that they're putting out government counterintelligence stuff, killing stories, and they say, well, that's our thing. I've got to be skeptical. I've got to, be analytical, and they're really not really doing any research. I call it like fake research. They just give out an opinion, and a lot of stories get killed. So I don't really believe there's that many people who are really disinformation people. And as I mentioned at the beginning, at Lorian's conference in March, depending what Lorian says with this third person that you know who it is, we may actually identify people who actually have confirmed, yes, that they are manipulating UFO stories, that they're controlling the story, and yet those people think they're saving the world. That's where I say, I don't really believe there are evil government people. Most people are just doing their job. They're just out there. They think they've got to protect classified material. You got too close to classified material, so they've got to throw you off. Almost like this Richard Doty story. And this is one of the other things that I don't know if your listeners are following, but Richard Doty was this very famous guy. Avery was he was known as a sparrow. Everybody, the cover story was that he was the falcon. He was never the falcon. He was the sparrow in the Avery. And he's the guy that was always notorious being identified as the guy who killed Benowitz. He ran Benowitz and destroyed Benowitz and this sort of thing. The guy was just simply doing his job. Paul Benowitz was describing UFOs over the Monsanto weapons storage area, which was the biggest repository of nuclear weapons in the world. And they simply could not allow him, a prominent businessman, to be putting out stories that there were UFOs over the weapons storage area, because this goes to nuclear weapons. This is a key part to the UFO story. So Doty was doing his job, and he was a counterintelligence guy. That was his job. He had to kill this story. So he kills the story, and now this guy's come forward. He's actually, I hear he's going on Coast to Coast. He was on Linda's show, which is very bizarre. Claims to have seen this 150-page document dealing with the Rendlesham Forest case. He's on boards. He's back in the thing. And I know he's going to be part of Ron Pandolfi, this guy from the CIA. There's a lot of documents that have been floating around where he's accusing Doty of being a Russian spy, and that there's going to be a lawsuit and all this sort of stuff. And yet I know for a fact that there's a documentary, a 6-part documentary that's supposed to be coming out, which was authorized by Ron at the CIA, and he sent the producer, who I know very well, to talk to to Richard Doty. So it's actually the CIA maybe bringing this guy back out again to run this sort of stuff. And so people don't really know, like, is Richard Doty a bad guy? Is he a good guy? I think 99% of people think he's a bad guy. And then Stephen Greer goes and interviews him. So I talked to Stephen Greer's producer in Laughlin, and he says, oh, yeah, we had him on. I said, well, who set up the interview? This is a critical thing. Like, who actually set up the interview? Was it Doty or was it Greer? And he said, no, Greer set up the interview. And he said, but he confessed. He confessed to being a disinformation guy, and it's like, really? That's what you heard in the interview? So people hear these different things. When I saw the Doty interview, I was actually more impressed that this guy may actually be for, telling some stuff that's actually real. Because some of the stuff, I don't know if you've seen this, it was an hour-and-a-half documentary, and Stephen Greer, for whatever reason, pulled it down. But some of the stuff he mentioned in that 1.5-hour interview that he did with Stephen Greer, and Stephen Greer put little bits and pieces of it in acknowledged. And the full interview, some of the stuff he was talking about was stuff that I knew, that I don't think anybody knew, because I studied this very closely about this very secret meeting they had in the Midwest before UFO Cover-Up Live. He was talking about this that nobody's ever talked about, and he was mentioning stuff that was actually real, that actually happened. And I'm going, wow, I thought this guy was a total nutcase. I'd argued with him as well in the 1980s. But here's this guy coming out. So what people got to realize, rather than trying to pick off who's right, who's wrong, who's disinformation, is that the government has a major role in what's happening. They are feeding stuff to different people. They are manipulating. They are running this thing and managing this story and trying to tell the story, but keep everybody off guard. And they're doing a fantastic job of doing it. But as I said, there are six teams that are actually running around, actually disclosing and at the same time, messing with people.
Got another question coming in, this one from Dennis in Edmonton, who is asking, Werner von Braun once said, the next thing after terrorism will be government saying aliens are attacking. Is this what Tom DeLonge is questionably trying to tell us?
Well, that's his theory, and he's used, all these people are military people, except for help put off. But basically, the military, and that's what I say is, you may actually have some of these military people who believe this, that there are these evil aliens. Because if you're in the military and you don't believe in an enemy, they're going to put you on the bench. You ain't playing. I mean, if you're in the military, you have to believe there's evil Russians and evil Chinese and evil Arabs and evil Mexicans. I mean, otherwise you don't have a job. If there's no enemy, we'll create an enemy. That's what it is. It's separation. That's what I say is the basic core problem in the world is the belief in separation, the belief that you and I are different, that we are separate, and that therefore I'm the good guy, you're the bad guy, I can kill you, I can steal your stuff, and it's the belief in separation, that we are separate from the Arabs, and if you believe that everybody's all one, that we're all like cells of the same body trying to keep the body alive, you can't do any evil. But he's playing into this group that it's to their advantage, and it is the ultimate false flag. That's why I said that I was going to write the book. I wanted out of UFOs in the worst way. I mean, I couldn't stand it. I wanted to do the consciousness thing. It even though it's kind of like a chess game, playing the disclosure thing, figuring out who's playing what game and what they're doing and stuff like that. It's a pretty ugly story to be in with what's going on. So I want to get out of the UFO field. But when Tom DeLonge came forward and said this thing about, we should use nuclear weapons and launch them into the high atmosphere to take down, swat down some bugs and kill these aliens, I'm thinking like, oh my goodness. I mean, this is like the ultimate false flag. Unless I put out a story, and even though nobody may read my book or my version of the fact that this evil alien thing is nonsense, you may actually get a false flag where everybody believes it because it's the only story there. Tom DeLonge says it's evil, the government says it's evil, and you may get in a situation where we're going to do something totally stupid, or people are going to believe, like a lot of people believe that, the Mexicans are rapists, thugs, and drug dealers, and, that every, Arab gets up in the morning and tries to figure out how to blow up a school bus with kids in it and stuff like that. And we have these bizarre ideas that people may actually start to believe that the aliens are here to do whatever and go along with it, because most people are sheeple. I mean, they don't really have any influence at all. It's whatever the head guy says, everybody just goes along with it, and we could get in a situation where, Trump or the Congress or somebody says, this is bad news, and we got to go to war, and everybody will just jump on the bandwagon. They do it every single time because everybody's looking for a messiah. They want, someone to tell them what to do, and people really haven't got the time to think. They're busy, trying to make a living and take their kids to soccer practice and stuff like this. They haven't got time to figure out these things. I mean, I'm sort of retired, so I can sit there and think about this 16 hours a day. Most people can't. So absolutely, this is, and Carol Rosin's show, and she was thrilled with what I was saying, is that, somebody has to step up, because this is basically what he's saying, is we need weapons in space, and this is the whole Star Wars thing, that we need to put these weapons, and we don't have enough enemies here, and we don't, $700 billion a year defense budget killing people on Earth isn't enough. Now we're going to go and take our misery into outer space and start killing people in outer space. This is absolute insanity if you understand the oneness, which is the number one message of the aliens. It's the oneness thing. It's Ronald Reagan, how the world would unite if we were faced with an alien threat. We'd all realize we're all one, and we'd realize we're just God's children. We're all the same thing. We're just like 100 trillion cells in the human body. We're all just cells from the same body. And what the aliens' message is basically is the tree analogy, that you say, okay, the Jews are evil. We got to cut off the branch, and so we cut off the branch, and then somebody else decides the Arabs. You cut that branch off, and then you cut off the Chinese branch, the North Vietnamese branch, and the Japanese branch. And the aliens are saying, quit cutting off the branches, because eventually you're going to cut off all the branches, and the tree is going to die. You're all part of the same thing. And so the military will play into this. They will play it because they need an enemy, and they don't want $700 billion defense budget going down to 6 or 5 or 4 or 3. They will play into this thing, even if they don't believe it's right. The same as I believe you don't need people to panic in disclosure. All you need is some clown who thinks he's going to make money off this thing, and he decides that, if they disclose oil's going south and I'm going to short the stock market, and he's going to short the stock market, and then all the stop losses are going to come in, and the market starts to melt down, and nobody can stop it. So it's, people believing they're saving the world or getting money for themselves. Everybody just believes they're doing the job, but you could actually walk into a false flag situation where people, almost like all the wars we've been in already, where we believed that the North Vietnamese were the worst on earth, and now they make Nike runners and they're our buddies. And the same with the Japanese; they were evil, and then suddenly that evil evaporated, and now they're good guys, and we trade with them and stuff. And we may get in a situation where we suddenly decide, like the Japanese, that the aliens are bad, and we've got to use nuclear weapons to kill them. And just people believe they're doing their job, and that we could end up destroying the world. Just by a false illusion as to understanding that we're not one, that we're separate.
Were you surprised that there were no named ufologists on this field or this team for Tom? I think that's one of the things that also red flagged for me, Grant, is that usually when we see this kind of amalgamation happen, I expected to see, no offense, your name or Stanton Friedman's name or Richard Dolan's name or people of that ilk in this involvement with this, and yet the entire UFO community really stayed away from this project. Was that by design, or were people given choices and chose not to be involved with this because of the ramifications of their research?
Well, he approached an awful lot of people, and a lot of people turned him down. For example, Jacques Vallée wrote an intro to one of his books. So Jacques Vallée was on the inside. But I think Jacques Vallée realized that this is crazy stuff. What he was putting out in terms of the evil alien thing. I'm just guessing, but I heard his name many times, that he was in this thing. John Alexander, his name was mentioned many times. I heard that he had connections. They tried to buy the free files, and the figure I heard was $4 million. They tried to buy the Edgar Mitchell free files, and I believe that the reason they were buying them, maybe the government wants to know who's an abductee, because it's the old idea that you can't control the phenomena, so you want to track the people who the phenomena is affecting. But Tom DeLonge, I believe it was simply to get stories. That if you get the free files and you get 5,000 experiencers who have these very, very bizarre stories of abduction and stuff, to him this is like, Tom is just basically, he even described himself as a super storyteller guy or something like. That's his thing. He's a media guy. He's selling records, he's selling T-shirts, and he said it's got to be like a trilogy. So he's basically in it for to tell stories and to this sort of stuff. He's not a scientific guy. He's not into that sort of stuff. But a lot of people were contacted, like Jacques Vallée, and you got Kit Green. His name is mentioned there. Linda Howe, as I mentioned before, she was contacted, and she was going to be one of the inside people. He basically offered her, you're going to be one of my main people and provide me all this sort of stuff. And a lot of these people walked away. Same as I've told this story numerous times about Chris Bledsoe. Chris Bledsoe was a prime contactee. He's one of the key contactees who has very high-level people watching him, because they're trying to figure out, like, why has this guy got all this contact? And when he told me he was involved with, and they were gonna part of the big production was going to be to tell Chris Bledsoe's story. So I said, well, what are you doing with Tom DeLonge? And he said, oh, well, he's a smart guy, and he's a nice guy. And I said, I don't deny that. I have no problem with that. But he's an evil alien guy. I said, your story, he comes in contact later on with this angel-type figure who says, I said, did the Shining Lady tell you there was evil aliens? And he said, no. And I said, well, what are you doing with Tom DeLonge? I mean, this is going to be evil alien stuff. I mean, and so he pulled out. And same as Ray Hernandez refused to sell him the files. And what was going to happen there was he would sell the files, and Ray and Bob Davis and the board would all work for Tom DeLonge. So he did make a lot of approaches to UFO researchers, and I think a lot of them would walk away. I mean, he would never approach me because, I mean, I was simply attacking him like this is absolute crazy stuff. This was, Bill Moore replayed from the 1980s with evil aliens. It was just crazy stuff. And I think a lot of the researchers that were contacted by Tom just would touch it. There's this Diane Pasolka, whose name you probably haven't heard yet, but her name will come up. She's just producing a UFO book. She was in there. She's the head of religion at University of North Carolina. I know she had some contacts, but they just couldn't buy this what he was putting out, and so I think that's more the problem rather than the fact that he didn't contact researchers. He's trying to contact everybody. So I give Tom DeLonge that thing, is that he figures I'm a big rock star and I'm going to control it all. I'm going to have all the sightings. I'm going to have all the movies. I'm going to control the whole UFO community. Even the idea that they had this they were going to put this app on the phone, and there was different versions as to why were they doing this. They put the app, a real-time app, if you see a UFO, and some people said, it was because they wanted to track the UFOs and shoot them down. So if you got these real-time apps on everybody's phone, they know exactly where the UFOs are at any time. And to me, I was going, no, I think it's to bypass MUFON and all the groups. So if you have an app on your phone and you see a UFO, then you contact Tom DeLonge on your app thing, you send it in. Now Tom DeLonge controls your story. Mm-hmm. He doesn't have to buy your story. He controls your story because you send it to him. And that to me is what Tom DeLonge is all about. It's about, as he said, a trilogy. This has got to be, Hollywood wants a trilogy. They want like a Star Wars. They want to sell toys. And that's where his impression is. He's going to control the UFO story. He's going to have all these UFO stories. He's going to be selling T-shirts. And he's going to be making millions of dollars. And he's going to be the guy that saved the world and had this whole thing. In terms of thinking, he hasn't really thought very much through it all. I mean, he's really not that smart when it comes to UFOs, even though he like Stephen Greer claims that he's got it all figured out. I mean, he was running a conspiracy website, and that was one of the things people got to realize. He was running this real wacko conspiracy website with this stuff that he knew was not true. He admitted this. He was putting stuff on there he knew was probably pretty questionable, but he was running it. And so when he went to Lockheed Skunk Works, he said that was one of the first things they did is confront him. Oh, you got this website with this conspiracy stuff. What's that all about? And then he's trying to talk his way out of the fact that he had this wacko conspiracy thing. So when he went to Lockheed, they knew all about him. That's why they picked him, because he would believe in the conspiracies. He's easily sort of manipulated. He's easily controlled, and that's what they want. They want somebody to control. If they had you or me, I mean, it would be like, I'd have about 3 hours and I'd be out of here. I mean, I got a couple stories I can tell, and I'm out of here. You got to have people that you can control, and probably you and I, they couldn't control, so they're not going to make contacts to us.
One of our guests and somebody who is very close to me in behind the scenes here on Spaced Out Radio is Tim Doyle from UFOseekers.com. I don't know if you had an opportunity to watch his video breakdown that he brought forward on looking into the financials through the SEC records about the To the Stars campaign. But what it said was that basically for every million that Tom DeLonge raises through this, he gets about 700,000 of it. The campaign right now is sitting at just a hair over $2 million, and this is to pay off other debts that Tom has with other sub-companies that he has going on. Have you looked into the finances or the financial aspect of what a lot of people are calling a pyramid scheme?
Yeah, I looked at that when it first came out. I probably saw his video. There's a couple of videos out there, but I really don't understand the financial aspect that much. With the loans and how, this loan is against that, and he's got to pay this loan back and stuff, and he gets, $100,000 a year just to use his picture and stuff like that. And again, this is, you can see the way it's set up. It's set up like almost every other sort of business where you're taking a cut. The thing, that's not what bothered me. The thing that bothered me was the fact that $2 million after, 2 months, they raised $2 million. a black budget program is going to spend this in like 12 minutes. I mean, this is absolute nonsense that they're going to, use any kind of money. You need billions, that you mentioned at the beginning of the show, and maybe even trillions of dollars. Pandolfi's used the word trillions. I mean, you're going to need a lot of money to back engineer this technology. That's just crazy stuff. My impression of what it was not so much that Tom's going to make money, because he's got other ways to make money. It's the fact that they wanted to have this soft spin that you can't really, if you don't have the let's go to the moon thing. That's what Mellon was talking about, how we were taken surprised by Sputnik, and this inspired the people to go to the moon, and, we did all this sort of stuff, and now we've been taken and we were inspired again. It's that sort of thing where they're trying to get people to buy into this thing. They're trying to get people to have a soft message, and that's why they pulled the evil alien thing out of there. They didn't come across with, Tom DeLonge's going to make a lot of money, because nobody would buy into it. Or we need to kill aliens because nobody's going to buy into it. That's where they have this whole program where we're going to do a new Kennedy to the moon thing, and we're going to get free energy, and Stephen Greer did the same thing with his program. We got to finance these guys that are running around with these free energy devices, and we're going to help them and all this kind of stuff. It's that sort of idea where you need people to buy into the project. So even though the money thing, even if he makes all the money, he's still nothing. There's almost no money there in terms of they've had the big time the first couple months. I mean, they're not raising much money after this. The $2 million is about as much as they're going to get. So it was. If he makes all that money, he really didn't make that much money at all. But you saw the way the thing was all formed. This corporation holds this corporation, which holds this corporation, and all these shell companies and all this kind of stuff. It was almost like he sets all his companies up that way, where he's taking his cut. And I don't know. I was just not an expert on it. I was more into the thing about what's the ultimate message, what's actually going on here. If Tom DeLonge makes $5 million, I really don't care. It's about who's running this operation and what are they actually doing. Because I'd known about this for a couple of years, and that part with the money thing, I really didn't know. I knew that they had, for example, I had heard they raised $200 million, and they were going to raise $1 billion on Wall Street to finance all these movie things through Steven Spielberg. They were going to do this thing. So if they're talking, and apparently from what I'd heard, they had $200 million pledged already. If they had that kind of money, this little $2 million on the bottom had really nothing to do with what the ultimate purpose was. His thing is big. It's the Steven Spielberg. It's like controlling projects that are worth hundreds of millions of dollars, where you're taking a cut off of all the stuff, and then the toys and all the rights and stuff like that.
Well, according to one of those websites that rates someone famous's net worth, Tom is said to be worth around $60 million. So crowdfunding for a spaceship that's going to cost in the billions is a little ridiculous, do you not think? Especially when you're that wealthy, it's very easy to meet people of that same wealth to invest.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. That was the crazy part. I mean, that was the part I missed. I knew everything else he was going to do, that he came out with the education and all that kind of stuff. But that's an absolutely crazy idea that we're going to, and most people picked it up right from the word go. I mean, they've got the technology already, and everybody knows it probably costs, trillions or billions of dollars, and that this is crazy stuff. But that's where, to me, it's a PR effort. It's you're trying to sell the idea, and it's the message that's behind the idea. It's not so much. I don't think he even believes he's going to build a flying saucer, but it's using that to indirectly move the message. The same as Tom DeLonge is a puppet. The same as Stephen Greer is a puppet. The same as Dan Smith is a puppet. The same as they offered me to be a puppet, and I turned it down. And they're just trying to find indirect ways to put out a story.
Mm-hmm. How does the public advance on this? Why are people investing, let's say, at a minimum $200 into this, Grant? Because the way I look at it, the UFO community is not a wealthy community. The paranormal community is not a wealthy community. And to me, having someone, if DeLonge did any type of research on this field, he would know that there are people willing to forego rent in order to buy ghost hunting gear or research UFOs a little bit more. And that's just the way it is. For some reason, this is a very, very poor or financially set community. And to hit those people up for $200, which could be their monthly food budget, I think it's a little bit ridiculous, and I'm not sure where he's trying to take advantage of that within this financial situation in this community.
Yeah, well, that's where I think I'm not sure that he really thought he was going to raise the $50 million or whatever it was. And I did know people who invested, and the people I know that invested on this whole idea, like, oh, it's kind of a neat idea, well, we can have free energy, and it's like, it's selling that thing where, like, at least he's doing something. He's out there. He's trying to help the world. He's trying to unravel a cover-up, and people were sort of cutting him slack, and they weren't investing huge amounts of money, but because there is some money in the UFO community. One of the stories that's out is this. I mentioned this one of the disclosure things is a six-part documentary that's nonfiction that's coming out of Hollywood that's being set up by Ron Pandolfi, and 4 parts are on the Avery, these high-level intelligence scientific people over the years who have been involved in this thing, and the last 2 are on the portal. And one of the names that was mentioned is Joe Firmage. Now, Joe Firmage has got this portal thing, and supposedly he's going to go on this show, and they're going to leak this story of the portal. So there is some money out there, but I just cannot believe that he actually thinks that he's going to raise $50 million. I think to me, it was a front. It was a front to get the story out there so people would get a soft sell, and indirectly they're gonna drop the message. Yeah, for example, like this Elizondo comes out, so everybody's talking about the money and everybody's interested in the money and stuff, and everybody missed the fact. Even Leslie Kane picked this up. She said Elizondo stood up and said, "I'm the guy in the Department of Defense who ran the UFO or the UFO threat program, and yes, UFOs are real." And it totally went over everybody's head. Nobody paid any attention. Everybody's talking about Tom DeLonge and the money, and this guy, Leslie Kane, says that's the closest thing I've ever seen to disclosure, and everybody's totally ignoring it. And that's where I'm saying. So the money it's almost like the deceptive thing where you give the Area 51 story to Bob Lazar, and Bob Lazar has all these bad background things, and he's helping run a brothel, and he's missing 2 degrees on his resume and stuff like that. And there's this controversy where in the midst of the mess that they create around these stories, the story's coming out, and people don't realize they're being fed a story. And I think that's what's happening here too. Is that this guy comes out and says UFOs are real, and then they leak the Nimitz story, and they leaked the video, and then I put the video on my White House UFO YouTube channel, and all this stuff is leaking out, and it's leaking out because people are allowing it to be leaked out. And the money thing, I think, is a bit of a diversion. I think people should be paying more attention to who are these people on the committee, why is nobody interviewing these people on the committee, and what are they actually doing? I'm thoroughly convinced they're not trying to build a flying saucer. They're trying to get a message out. That's why they contacted Tom DeLonge. That's what they're doing, is they're starting over from 1947. They've said, yes, UFOs are real, and we're going to try to figure it out. We don't know, but we're going to try to figure it out. They've actually admitted that UFOs are real.
Mm-hmm. So in the end, how do people trust Tom? Because you mentioned Leslie Kane saying what Lou Elizondo said, and that does make sense. I do recall hearing that. But I think for the majority of people in the UFO community, whether they are experiencers or just have an interest, I think they were so offended that Tom had been leading on for months and months that he was going to bring disclosure to the table, and everybody tunes into this press conference, and it's a telethon. And I think so many people were so offended by that, Grant, that the message that Lou Elizondo said went right over everybody's heads.
Oh, yeah. But the UFO community does that to everybody. I mean, everybody is like Bill Moore. Bill Moore was the top researcher in the 1980s, and he ended up having to leave the field. He was so discredited, and that's what I think is part of their deal, is that they will feed you material, and then they will take you apart in the public. They will actually set things up like this to destroy Tom DeLonge. Because you can't, it's almost the idea, like you got to remember this thing with Bill Moore. Bill Moore was the top researcher when he brought out the Roswell book. He had actual witnesses. He had, the head of intelligence at Roswell was telling the story. You had all these witnesses, and suddenly you had this credible guy who was telling this story. And so what you want to do is you want the story, but you got to kill Bill Moore. You got to destroy Bill Moore. So that's what I think the same thing with Tom DeLonge is. You cannot allow Tom DeLonge to be a credible thing, because then you lose the story. You have to have these stories leaking out through uncredible sources where people question it, where people are fighting and stuff like this. And at the same time, the message is getting out. There's that to me is always part of the program. Like, for example, Dan Smith, who's the number one that Ron Pandolfi leaks stuff to. He's been leaking to him for 27 years, including the live alien at Los Alamos, including the gravity waves long before the gravity wave thing. He was on a DARPA panel that was on this thing. Lots of stuff he's been leaking for 27 years. And Dan Smith he believes he's the Holy Spirit. He's into eschatology, and everybody goes like, "Oh my God, don't talk to me about Dan Smith. This guy's absolutely nuts." And that's the people they put it through. Because if you want it, again, when I start, whether it's alien disclosure or whether it's government disclosure, people have to, and nobody catches this. I say it almost every lecture. Nobody catches this. If the government wanted to disclose, they would get the New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN, and Fox News. They'd take them and show them the bodies and the craft, and they'd have a news conference, and they would say, whatever you need, we'll answer your questions. They are not disclosing. They are not covering up either, because if they wanted to cover up, they would just shut up like every other country in the world and not talk about it, and the story would go away. So they're doing something in between. The same as the aliens are doing the same thing. If the aliens wanted to disclose, they'd land on the White House lawn and tell us what's going on. They haven't done that. And they also have not covered up, because if the aliens wanted, they could do what they do with alien abductions and turn the lights off, and nobody would know they're around. Why do UFOs have lights on it? Because they want you to see it. It's this gradual disclosure thing, and so people have to realize it's all about gradual disclosure. There will be no disclosure. The president will not stand up on national TV and commit suicide. That's not what's going to happen. They're gradually leaking this thing out, and the way you leak it out is you have to do it through really unreliable sources and stuff, so everybody's fighting, so the story doesn't get out of control. Because if the story gets out of control, then you have a situation where you may have the stock market meltdown, you may have mass panic, you may have all sorts of things that they can't control, and so they're trying to do this as slowly as possible, and the way they do it is to put it through unreliable people like Tom DeLonge and Stephen Greer, who's got all sorts of personality problems. Dan Smith's got all sorts of personality problems, and that's the way you do it. Because if you want to give it, you can go to stand the president up or give it to some real authoritative editor of the New York Times, but then it's out. That's not what they're doing. They're going to sources that aren't the editor of the New York Times. They're people who everybody questions as being unreliable, telling lies and stuff. That's how they do it. The story is getting out through these people.
Where do you see this going? Do you see this eventually fading away into the sunset, and they're just going to take the money and run? Because there is, in the fine print, words that basically say, look, we can't guarantee you that you're going to make a dime off of this investment. Your share for $200 is really only worth $5 anyways.
Well, the money's gone. I mean, to me, the money is irrelevant. That's game over. It was game over from day one. There was no... I don't think there was any intention to make money. Some people believed it. They, whatever. It's not about the money. It's about what they're doing, and they're going to continue to do this gradual disclosure. As I said, people got to realize this is only one of 6 programs that's going on. Tom DeLonge is just one thing, and everybody's focused on him. But as I said, this Richard Doty guy's running around. He's like talking to everybody. I mean, they've revised this guy, and I got offered an executive producer thing on this 6-part documentary thing. I know there's all sorts of programs, and I think what had happened was Barack Obama gave an interview to GQ magazine in November of 2015 and outed the UFO subject and made it available to talk about and basically declassify the UFO subject. And since January of 2016, this is what I've heard, it's like all hands on deck. They are determined they are going to leak this story left, right, and center, and the stuff is leaking all over the place. It's just unbelievable. I've never seen anything like it.
So in the end, is it the White House then who is controlling this, or whoever is sitting in the presidential seat?
Absolutely. Jim Semivan was a briefer for the President of the United States. John Podesta was an advisor to the president, and Ron Pandolfi's the guy that briefs the president. And I believe Ron Pandolfi's behind all this stuff. He's the guy that briefed Semivan when he left the CIA. He's the key guy. And yes, the president, this is the big scam, that another thing that people just never catch on, that the president is the Wizard of Oz. He's running the cover-up, all security, all classification, all the top secret, all those code names, everything. It is run out of the executive office of the president. It's not done by law. All security is run out of the executive office of the president. The president can see whatever he wants. He has no security clearance. He has access to all 17 intelligence agencies working for him. He's the head of state. If you're dealing with a foreign power, aliens, it has to be the head of state that negotiates. That's the president of the United States. He's the chief executive officer of the government. He has to be in charge of all this kind of stuff. And what they want you to think, and they've made people buy this thing, is that the president's an idiot. He doesn't know anything about Russia. No way, man. There may be these people below him, but the president never had anything to do with Russia. He never had anything to do with Iran-Contra. He has nothing to do with UFOs. He's just an idiot. He's this puppet in there, and every day the evil cabal comes in and tells Donald Trump what to do, and Donald Trump kisses the guy's ring and salutes. Yeah, come on, give it a... I mean, the president is running the show, and what they want is plausible deniability, that you don't ask the president. So they make it look like the president's an idiot, so you don't ask him, because if everybody knows the president's running the cover-up, it's over. People start asking questions. And so you have this sort of thing where everybody's chasing the Wizard of Oz and the evil cabal down some dark alley, dead-end road, and everybody gets disillusioned. They can't figure out what's going on because you're chasing the wrong person. It's happening right under everybody's nose. And so, yeah, the president knows, and that's why I'm saying you have these very high-level 3 people inside the White House, inside the Oval Office, are part of this operation, and you can clearly pin them to the president of the United States. And you see what Barack Obama was doing. It was clear that when a president talks about a subject, he opens up the subject, and Barack talked about UFOs in November of 2015.
Is Donald Trump a UFO guy?
He's not a UFO guy. He was briefed. There was a message put out by Robert Collins, who was a physicist. He was known as the Condor in the Avery. He was a physicist at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. He came out with a message on January the 6th of this year that said Donald Trump is... He said, I got a message from my good friend Ron Pandolfi at the CIA, who got me an interview with the CIA. And Ron says that Donald Trump is pro-disclosure and against disinformation. And at that point, because I'd written about Pandolfi for 20 years, I knew he was the head guy, and suddenly he was talking about Trump being disclosure. So I started to track down everybody I knew who knew Ron Pandolfi. Nobody had talked to me except for Dan Smith. And Dan Smith said, I've been blogging about this for 2 months. Give me a call. Give me his phone number. I phoned him up. I said, did he brief Trump? He said, yeah, he briefed Trump. He was with him every day in December. At least that's what Ron was telling Dan Smith, which doesn't really mean anything, because Steve Bassett phones up Ron Pandolfi and said, I heard you briefed Trump. And he said, did not. It's all plausible deniability. He'll deny everything that he ever told Dan Smith. But he was with him every day, and then you have Ron Pandolfi going on camera in December on a cruise ship where he actually talks about portals. And he talks about going into another world and coming back on camera. I just couldn't believe it. So you have him, but from what I heard, Ron Pandolfi and his wife are putting out this portal story, and that Ron Pandolfi's wife, Leah Pandolfi, who's got a master's degree and has the Kashmir Foundation, actually helped brief Donald Trump on this portal thing. And Trump basically has greenlighted the thing, because this program's been going on for many years, this gradual disclosure thing. It's always been approved, and Trump allowed it, but said he really wasn't interested, and he didn't really want to be involved. And that confirmed what he had said beforehand when Hillary was running around saying she was going to disclose UFOs. One of the New York Times reporters actually asked Donald Trump about what do you think about Hillary saying she's going to disclose, and he said, I assume you're talking about outer space. I'm really not that interested. So he said he's not interested, but he has allowed Ron Pandolfi to go ahead with the program, this disclosure program, to gradually leak this story out.
So if Donald Trump isn't into the whole UFO subject, is it because he maybe personally a non-believer, or is it because he feels he has too much more to worry about rather than what's happening up in space with our sky friends?
Well, he's actually stated that he's not interested in the subject. Although now you're starting to see him talking about the F-35. There's articles yesterday and the day before where he's sort of bragging about the F-35, the invisible spy. We got this invisible spy plane, this plane that's invisible. How can you fight against a plane that's invisible? So he's sort of getting into it, but from what I've heard, he's just not that interested in the whole thing. Bannon was one of the names that was being bounced around. That Bannon was actually the guy that was dealing with the subject. That he was the guy that was sort of knew more about what was going on and the approvals and stuff like that. But again, I say we got to remind people that this program has been going on 1947. Kenneth Arnold has his sighting, and he's approached by the 4th Air Force, and they give him, according to his daughter's been on camera about this, 2 8x11 gun camera film pictures, clear as day, daylight, very clear flying saucers, and they tried to assure him that these were actual flying saucers that they were giving him, and gave him these photographs. So if you want to cover up, you're not going to go to the first guy who has a UFO sighting and try to convince him that this is for real. They've been doing this leak thing and this disclosure program for many, many years. There's been 14 administrations. They've all done exactly the same thing. So it's not an evil government thing, or the Republicans got it right or the Democrats got it right. They're all doing the same thing, which indicates there are rules, and once you understand what's going on behind the scenes, you're going to agree with what they're doing, that they're all just basically doing what they think they have to do, and that every administration has done the same thing.
Where does this lead the field of ufology? Does it lead it more into confusion, Grant, or are we trying to get more on a straight and narrow? Because for a lot of people out there that are just getting into this field, or they've had that UFO experience, they really don't know what's going on behind the scenes that people like yourself know. So is this just to add more confusion to this field as people question what is real and what is just disinformation?
No. When I started in 1975, there was absolutely nothing. I mean, people got to realize that what happened then doesn't happen now. What happens now doesn't happen then. It's 100. I know 100 times more than what I knew in 1975, and I know more than the average person because this is what I do. I just basically look at it. But when you start leaking the story of the portal, which I think is actually real, because I'm working on this other story, which is a Zendra story, which is it's the biggest story I've ever run across in my life. But when you get this thing that they're leaking the story of the portal, and this idea that there's consciousness involved and that they're not using spacecraft, they're leaking some pretty key elements to this whole story, or the fact they had a live alien, or the fact that they had craft at Area 51, which is a true story, and that they had the live alien in there. They've leaked all this stuff that nobody would have known if they hadn't done it. They definitely, they are leaking a lot of components, and it'll take a while for it to filter down. That's my job, and your job is to get this to the public, to let them know the story about the portal and all this kind of stuff. But they have to come through us, and then it's up to us. That's what Bill Clinton said supposedly said to Stephen Greer through this message, through one of his emissaries, was he said, we can't do it, but you can. So that's what they want. That's why Hillary Clinton never never brought up the UFO subject, but she answered every UFO question she was ever asked. It's sort of like the job is up to us to get this message to the people as to what's going on. And I think I know a lot about what's going on. Exactly. I mean, in Managing Magic, I named over 20 CIA people. I name exactly who's running the thing, and I know Pandolfi read the book. Didn't comment. He's nothing he can really say. But we know the people. We know who's running it. I think we know an awful lot of it, and it's up to us to get the message of what's actually going on to the public, because the public is basically just basically living their life, trying to, take their kids to soccer practice and pay the bills and, fix the car and that sort of stuff. They haven't got time. But you even see the last year there was 6 shows in that came out with the idea of portals. So suddenly you've got all these portals in these TV shows. They're directly, indirectly, and directly leaking material to the public. Most of it's coming through Hollywood because that's the best way to do it. Subliminally, when people aren't really looking, where they put it in or they put it into music, but Hollywood is the big one. Chase Brandon, who came out, he was the liaison to Hollywood. This is the guy who wrote the book on how the CIA handled the Roswell thing. He said, if you want a good story, read my book. He said, if you want to learn something, read between the lines. I mean, here's a guy who still works in Hollywood. He's an advisor in Hollywood. He's no longer white world CIA. Now he's black world CIA. But let me guarantee you, he's in Hollywood putting out different ideas of the UFO story into documentaries and into things to acclimatize the people, because they've got to acclimatize the people. That's what the Brookings Institute report said. You've got to acquaint the people with the fact that we aren't alone, but you can't do it quickly. You've got to do it slowly.
Grant, we're almost done hour number 2 here before Lorian Fenton is going to join us in hour number 3, and you're going to stick around for a few minutes with that, and I really do appreciate it. I learned something a couple weeks ago in dealing with, I had to talk to an RCMP officer. No, I didn't do anything bad. But after this conversation about UFOs with this RCMP officer who happened to work in the radar division of the Canadian military at one point too, I was very surprised to learn that all RCMP UFO sighting reports go through NORAD effective immediately. Were you aware of that, and what's your thoughts of that?
I didn't know that. I've known some guys. I knew the RCMP guy who investigated the Langenberg UFOs, where this 6 UFOs came down in the wheat field. No, I wasn't aware of that. I know NORAD is a key element. We just put out a video of a guy with a scramble out of BC, a NORAD guy on my White House UFO YouTube channel. But no, and it's all linked together in Canada, and that's what people got to realize is that if you got reports coming in from all these different things, there are channels where all you need is one guy to pull the reports, on Need to Know, where they're able to gather all the UFO material without anybody even knowing that they're gathering the material, and they've perfected the technique of gathering material and keeping it secret.
Yeah, it absolutely amazed me, and I'll fill you in on that as well here when we go to break here. But I'm glad you're going to stick around, because I know Lorian Fenton is a good friend of yours, and it's something that it's going to be a lot of fun going into hour number 3. And thank you so much, Grant, for 2 hours of incredible information for the Spaced Out Radio audience. I'll get you to hold on while we are going to go to break here right now on the mighty SOR. And I do have to say, I'm a little upset with the Twitter crowd right now at hashtag Spaced Out Radio. They know I like my Mexican food, and all their tweeting is about tacos and Taco Bell. I'm weak, and the closest Taco Bell is 2.5 hours away. Very disappointing, Twitter crowd. Very disappointing. Lorian Fenton from the Fenton Perspective and Grant Cameron continue with us right after this in hour number 3 of Spaced Out Radio. We'll be right back.
We're getting strange on Saturday nights. Hi there, this is Dave Cruz, and each Saturday, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, I will take you on a tour of the weird and obtuse on Spaced Out Saturdays, from aliens to Sasquatch and every tinfoil hat in between. We got you covered. Join us at spacedoutradio.com for Spaced Out Saturdays. See you there.
Not ready for bed on Saturday night? Right after Spaced Out Saturdays, hop on over to S4 with Corey Ruiz and me, Eric Cooper from Forest Moon Paranormal. With S4, there are no limits to what we try and uncover. From government conspiracies to helping clean up the paranormal, no topic is safe on S4. We get to the heart of the matter, of the subjects you want to learn more about. So tune in on S4 starting at midnight Pacific, 3 a.m. Eastern, only on spacedoutradio.com.
Have you had an experience you can't explain? Would you like someone you can trust to look into it? We have just the place. The SOR Sightlines Report is the place for you to find answers. Whether it's Bigfoot, UFOs, Dogman, ghosts, aliens, or anything strange, the Sightlines Report will get you connected with one of our expert researchers to find out what's going on. All of your personal information is kept 100% confidential. The SOR Sightlines Report, a place for you to find the answers you need, only at spacedoutradio.com.
Hi there, I'm Butch Witkowski, lead investigator with UFO Cop. On the final Monday of every month, you can listen to me and host Dave Scott on Spaced Out Radio's Strange Days. We're going to get to the heart of the matter when it comes to what's happening out there. People are seeing and experiencing things from ET contact to Bigfoot, and I want to hear about it. Your experiences are what we investigators need to help solve these unknown mysteries. So tune in at spacedoutradio.com to the final Monday of every month from Butch Witkowski's Strange Days.
This is Eric Markham, news editor for the Spaced Out Radio's The Encounter Online. We have put together a great team of writers and journalists from all over the world to bring you top-quality paranormal stories, from alien encounters to the latest conspiracies. You won't find any of that fake news here. True stories and top-notch reporting as we look to bring these experiences to the mainstream. The Encounter Online, only at spacedoutradio.com.
Do you want to know the truth? Do UFOs exist? Are aliens real? Are the governments hiding the biggest secret in history? We're UFO seekers, and we're on a hunt for the truth. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow along with us as we journey across the United States, visiting UFO hotspots and alien hotspots, trying to document the UFO phenomenon. Catch us on Spaced Out Radio every third Monday of the month as we discuss Area 51, UFOs, and more. And also, don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube.
Patrolling the Pacific Northwest, we are always on the lookout for the strange and unassuming stories that real people are experiencing. Hi, I'm Vincent Zunza from Pacific North Weird. Me and Alexandra Sullivan have teamed to bring to you those odd stories that never seem to make it into the mainstream. Stories so weird that will leave you scratching your head wondering, is this real? It's as real as it gets with Pacific North Weird. You can watch our videos right here at spacedoutradio.com.
Become more intimate and interactive with Spaced Out Radio. Join our Space Travelers Club with your new membership. For $5 a month, we'll provide you with special access to the website, monthly prize draws from books to psychic readings, along with monthly newsletter, private interviews, and more. Sign up today to be part of Spaced Out Radio's experience.
Looking for a place to advertise at a very reasonable cost? Look no further than Spaced Out Radio. SpacedOutRadio.com has an advertising tab that you can click to check out our daily, weekly, and monthly packages to play on the radio, or our website including social media. From commercial spots to banners, we have it all. Check out our competitive pricing today.
Don't have time to listen to Spaced Out Radio live? Wherever you are, the car, the office, the shower, or even if you're traveling, we're right here for you. Each Spaced Out Radio show can be found on iTunes, TuneIn, and on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. It's the perfect way for you to catch up on our shows. For more information, just head over to our website, spacedoutradio.com, and tune in to us today.
You hear footsteps in the empty room above you. A rocking chair begins rocking by itself. Don't be afraid of the things that go bump in the night. Reach for Spirit Storybox, the iPhone app the Huffington Post UK called the only ghost hunting app you will ever need. Spirit Storybox. The spirits are telling their stories. Are you listening?
Strange creatures lurking in the night, the sounds of wood knocking in the forest, odd happenings right out of a fictional world. These are the reports I love. Hi there, this is author Ronald Murphy, and I would love it if you join me and Spaced Out Radio host Dave Scott the second Wednesday of every month on our journey into the unknown land of cryptozoology at spacedoutradio.com. From Mothman to Frogman and everything in between. Hey, they don't call me the crypto guru for nothing.
It's Cosmic Sundays with me, Elizabeth Anglin, in Cosmic Passport. Let me take you down a 3-hour spiritual journey where we will get into everything from ET contact to Psychic Sundays. It's a journey of listening and learning together with some of the best professionals in their fields. You can tune in to Cosmic Passport at spacedoutradio.com every Sunday, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern.
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio with Dave Scott. Follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and hashtag Spaced Out Radio, and on Facebook, Spaced Out Radio Show. Now, back to the program.
Welcome back to the third and final hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. Great to have you with us. Tomorrow night on the program, we look at the month that was. It's the final Friday of the month, which means we're going to be doing the SOR Paranormal Roundtable. It happens the final Friday. I bring in some friends. We talk about all the weird and strange stories of the month of November. It kicks off at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time at spacedoutradio.com. We want to welcome in everyone listening in on WQEE 99 Rock the Key down in Noonan, Georgia, home of The Walking Dead. We are live as well on the United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM in New Orleans, and over 160 countries around the world. Great to have you with us as well. We are also live on KTLK, TheFringe.fm, Renegade Talk Radio out of Las Vegas, and if you're listening in on Revolution Radio, remember the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you, the valued listener. Head on over to freedomslips.com and donate today. Bill Cardwell has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Usage Aster. Usage Aster. Nobody knows what it means, or even if we're pronouncing it right, but that is your password for tonight for the SOR Space Travelers Club, so make sure you use it wisely. Now, we're all over social media. Follow us on Twitter, at Spaced Out Radio. Use the hashtag Spaced Out Radio. No, we don't need any gnomes or any more taco photos, because I am hungry right now. You can give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. You could also join us for live chat on Facebook in the SOR Space Travelers group. We're on Instagram, Dave Scott, SOR. Our brand new YouTube channel is Spaced Out Radio, no longer Spaced Out Radio Show. So unsubscribe from the old channel, come on over to the new channel. It's much more fun over there. We're on iHeartRadio in the United States, TalkStream Live. Tune us in on TuneIn. Download and subscribe to our shows on iTunes. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including joining the SOR Space Travelers Club for $5 a month. Shop at our Spaced Out Radio store. Rock out to some Bumblefoot. Watch great videos from UFO seekers and Contact TV as well. Read up on all your weird and strange news on the Encounter online. Everything at spacedoutradio.com. In hour number 3, we have From the Fenton Perspective, and a lady who is very well known around the field of ufology, Lorian Fenton. And Grant Cameron has decided to stick around for a few minutes here in hour number 3 to be a part of it. Lorian, Grant, welcome back.
Thank you, Dave. I really appreciate being here tonight on Thanksgiving down here in America.
Oh,
yeah, that's right.
Thank you.
That's
beautiful.
Right.
We're privileged to have you on such a special day.
Yeah, no, I'm really grateful. You know, you guys, I was thinking about it all day today. I'm super, super grateful for the knowledge that I have been given over the years. Like Grant, I've been in this field for a very, very long time, but I came at it backwards. And Grant will laugh when he hears this. You know, I was a psychic growing up, and that's all I ever thought I was. And I had all these strange and amazing, weird things happen to me, and I never really equated it to the UFO field, but I'm really glad I didn't. I'm really glad I wasn't a contactee, abductee in the light that other people have been, because what it did is it gave me a perspective from a consciousness point of view about how my contact is. And my contact, as Grant knows, and Dave, is very different than most people. I don't see grays or reptilians, and I haven't been taken on a ship, and I haven't had alien babies and all the things that I'm jealous of my other friends for having all these kids in space. I have no kids at all. And I kind of look at it like, well, maybe, they had a plan for me, and the plan is this. I wasn't allowed to really know about the whole UFO thing until 2010-11, when I had a very bizarre weekend, which we're not going to go into tonight, but it all revolved around mind control. And so I come at it from a very different aspect than most people. So that's why I gravitated to Grant right at the beginning of coming into this field, because Grant was looking at the consciousness aspect of everything that's going on. And I came across Chris Bledsoe's story, and it involved the white lady or the angel lady or the good part of it. And I thought, that's the people I contact, that contact me, is the angel people. What I call the 9th or 10th dimensional aliens from another time space. And this is the part that was very fascinating to me. I don't care, people go, well, don't you care about the UFOs and the aliens landing and all that? I said, I could care less, because those are the guys that run around the neighborhood of the universe and land on our planet, and they hang out here and they do strange things to us and what have you. What I want to know about is the consciousness, the portals, the time travel, the slots, as Bernie Mendez calls them, where they create these holodecks for us to go into with our consciousness when we're taken. I mean, there are so many aspects to this that people have no idea. And this leads me right back to what Grant was talking about all night tonight. The whole thing with the Tom DeLonge, and it goes back to the aviary and the working group and everybody involved since the very beginning in 1947 or before. It all goes back to the fact that they don't want you to pay attention to the consciousness aspect. They want you looking for lights in the sky. They want you to get freaked out about the aliens landing and having us for lunch, as in to serve man. They want you kept in that fear space, and they want to control the narrative. And that's what it's all about, in a nutshell, is that Grant and myself and our unnamed friend. And guess what? Our unnamed friend is calling me right now.
Oh, there you go.
But I can't answer the phone and be on the radio at the same time. So this is trouble. But when we get a break, I might call her back. Anyhow, point to all this, I'm saying, folks, you've got to understand, it's like the man behind the curtain in The Wizard of Oz. It's all about keeping you distracted from the reality that they've understood for a very long time now. You don't think that Hal Puthoff and all these guys that were involved in remote viewing, and we can even go back to Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard and all those guys opening portals out at Area 51. Don't tell me that isn't the real story going on here. And they trot out these people every 5 to 10 years, right, Grant?
Yep.
Oh, this guy knows the answer. He's the guru. He's the guy.
Yep.
And I sat around for the first couple of years of getting into the UFO community, and I kept saying to myself, why are these guys being followed around like they're gurus and gods? They don't know any more than anybody else. I could never figure it out. And I realized mind control plays a huge part in everything these people do. It's all about convincing you that that's what's important. What do you think all those radio talk shows are out there for? I'm sorry, Dave. There's nothing against you here. But this is all about, and I'm not going to name all the shows, but you guys know who I'm talking about. It's all these shows bring you so much information, and they steer you into that direction, thinking that's what you got to be talking about at the conferences. That's who you've got to listen to at the conferences. My biggest complaint, and Grant knows about this because I complain about it all the time, is why is a guy up on stage getting a standing ovation for a book he wrote about aliens, and he's never had contact in his entire life and admits it? What is he doing on that stage at that UFO alien conference, getting this kind of praise from the people? Whereas Grant, who actually has had contact with Charlie Red Star orbs, and I believe he's seen aliens. I don't know because I forgot to ask him last time I interviewed him. But the point to all this is, people like Grant should be the guys that everybody's following because they're telling the truth.
I agree.
They are not speculating and following the party line. And this is where the brainwashing and the hypnosis comes into play. These guys are used to keep the community not asking the right questions or looking behind the curtain. And I'm going to let Grant chime in here. What do you think about that, Grant?
Well, let me ask you a question, because one of the questions that was asked to me in the last hour was sort of this idea that we're sort of misled. We don't know what's going on. So let me ask you. I mean, you've been in it maybe as long as I have. Do you think that we know more today than we knew 10 years ago or 20 years ago?
No. You know why? Because all of us that are older, that have been in this for 40 years, and I'm gonna bring up the whole Corey Goode debacle, and everybody hates me for it. But here's the deal, folks. Corey Goode is just the same guy in a long line of these people they trotted out. Now, Corey Goode backfired on him. So they brought Tom DeLonge in pretty quickly right after that, didn't they? You know, Tom DeLonge was sitting on the shelf for about a year and a half to 2 years. And then Corey Goode came along, and he was doing okay for about a year and a half. And the minute he started having problems, within 2 months, Tom DeLonge's out there. Okay? Now, they could have trotted Tom DeLonge out any time sooner. They could have waited till later. But I noticed it was right about the time the Dark Alliance, which I'm supposedly part of, came to the forefront and said, hey, this guy's full of BS. Were you at the MUFON Symposium, Grant? No, you weren't. You were at Laughlin. Okay. So I'm going to tell you guys a story. You guys are going to love this. I'm sitting at the MUFON Symposium in Laughlin. Now, Corey Goode has not, for 2 years, I've been trying to get him on my radio show. He refuses to come on it probably because I was going to ask him the hard questions. And more than likely, he's been told to stay away from me up until that point. This is before the Dark Alliance even kind of, took shape. Yeah. So I'm sitting there at the conference, and I had my good friend Aaron go sit in the press conference that they had, where they said to everybody, if you want to interview any of these people at the table, that included Bill Tompkins, Corey Goode, I can't remember all the rest of the people sitting on that table, but I said, Aaron, run over and make sure you get Corey Goode to commit to being on my radio show right now after that press conference. And he did. He went up to the guy that said, okay, I'll go talk to Corey. And then he went and talked to Corey, and he came back and he told Aaron to tell me he's got to go up to his room and he's got to do some little interview with a person, somebody else. Turns out it was the woman that interviewed his wife and that young lady, I can't remember her name. And he'll come down he'll be down in a while to do an interview with you. Where are you? And he said, we're right here in the lobby. He goes, oh, yeah, I know where you're at. I'll tell him. Okay, so he goes and tells Corey this out in the thing. Aaron sees him out in the hallway telling him this, and Corey takes off. He comes up to my table and says, Corey will be here in a little while. I said, okay, great. So Corey finally, after 2 or 3 hours, and I'm turning people down to interview because I'm waiting for him to show up. So I've missed the opportunity to interview quite a few people. And I'm sitting there and I'm getting mad. I'm like, okay, he agrees to this and he doesn't show up. So finally he shows up. He's in the middle of the foyer there at the conference, and my good friend Janet Leston is talking to him, and I run right over because, as you guys know, I have no problem confronting people. And I run right over and I said, where have you been? You're supposed to be on my radio show. And he goes, oh, I didn't know anything about it. And at that moment I realized, he is not allowed to talk. I just knew it. I knew. And then I just said, well, look, I'll catch you tomorrow or whatever. But he's being handled, folks. He's being handled by a whole bunch of people that are telling him who he can and cannot talk to. And I'm going to go into the rest of the story. So the next day he's supposed to speak. I'm there, and I'm already livid at him, okay? I'm already mad. So a good friend, Melinda Leslie, and my other good friend, Misha Johnston, who are longtime contactees and researchers, said to me, well, Lorian, maybe it's you guys are going to love this, maybe it's a good idea you stay home and watch the live stream of his presentation. And they said, because we're afraid you're going to run up on stage, grab the microphone from him, and start telling people who he stole all of his material from. And I said, yeah, I probably will be doing that, so maybe you're right. So at 10 o'clock in the morning, I'm over at my good friend Betsy's place, staying there for the conference, and I have the access to the live stream, and I'm watching it, and I'm fuming. I started getting mad. By the time he was done, I was driving 105 miles an hour down the freeway to get back to the place. And here's the great part about all this, you guys. There's a whole bunch of researchers in that MUFON symposium. I mean, people have been in the business a long time, and I call it a business because in a lot of ways it is a business. And so they're all sitting there, and Melinda, thank God bless her soul, she stood at the door and asked people as they were walking out what they thought of it, and the old-time researchers just looked at her and shook their head and say, who planted this guy? How does he get away with stealing everybody's story? And then the nerve, here's the part that changed the UFO world, right? The UFO community. And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking to myself, what have we all been doing for 45 years? You know, we've all been, what are we, chopped liver, right? You know? And I was so offended by that statement that I was fuming mad. If I'd seen him at that point, I would have gone up to him and asked him who in the heck he thought he was. But anyhow, Melinda got this answer from everybody else. They were offended. They were mad about the fact that they actually had, out of his mouth, he says to the audience, oh, this is what it looks like on the moon. And I'm looking at Niara Isley's photograph, and he starts telling Niara's story. And he doesn't say it's not his story, but he doesn't give credit to the person whose story it is. Okay? Yeah. So it makes you think that he's the guy that knows all about this, right? Yeah. And he did that with about 35 years of history and all these people. So don't tell me the guy's not handled, played, and given a script to memorize. I mean, because somebody out there is doing the research, and you know that, Grant, because you've heard him speak. And you could just rattle off the names of the people that he stole the stuff from. I mean, it's mind-boggling to me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's what people have to realize, that it's highly managed, that these guys have done this. I mean, if you're, even the thing with, very highly classified programs, their story is that they spend more on security than they do on the program. These guys, right. It's not their first rodeo. They know exactly what they're doing with this kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, and you guys were talking earlier in the show. I popped in about 9:35 my time Pacific, and I noticed you were starting to talk about the money that Tom DeLonge was getting. And I'm a bookkeeper, and I've also run quite a few businesses for family and other people. And the first day that thing, the whole announcement came out, they had put their prospectus up on the website in a PDF form. It's about 50 pages. I can't remember. And I started reading through that, and I'm telling you, folks, it's all about him getting paid off for being their front man in this organization. That's all it is. They're just, they're giving him $700,000 out of every million. So every million is going to go into his slush fund so he can keep this going, and he gets the proceeds from all of the entertainment part of the whole game that they're playing. Yeah. So basically, they bought a front man that's intelligent enough to be able to communicate with us. Corey Good backfired because he, in my opinion, is a contactee. He is probably a mind control victim, and I have a pretty good idea of how they're using him. Okay, so that's another show for, another story for another show for another day. But the bottom line is he didn't work out well because he wasn't as controllable as they hoped he would be. And I do believe, and I'm going to throw myself out on the limb here, Grant, I believe that David Wilcox is part of the problem too. And just from observing him for all the years I've known him, I met him in 2010, and he's always been difficult. That's the only word I can use to describe him. And money has always been an issue. So when you put those two things into play, and then you add ego in, then you are easily controlled. As you and I both know, all the gurus they've got out there are all the ego. It's just all about ego.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So are we going to expose all this at your conference? What are we going to do at your conference?
Well, I think at the conference we're going to bring in our third wheel because it's the Three Musketeers now, and I think we're going to talk about who these people actually are because I think since our conversation in Laughlin, I have discovered a few more people that aren't main players, but are people out there within the media that are part of the issue, and I think we've got to start exposing them as well because here's an example. I'm not going to say who it was. But there's a person out on the internet that's pretty well known. And they bring on, for the JFK thing about UFOs and the JFK connection, who do they bring on but somebody who has nothing to do with JFK, okay? And they know me, and they know that I am the biggest proponent of the JFK thing. I've been telling you guys for 10 years now, it's all connected. The JFK thing was kind of the beginning of a lot of the pieces about how they manage security, how much they think they can get away with, what the CIA involvement is. I mean, there's a lot of pieces with JFK that are all connected to this. And so instead of calling me, because I would actually be able to be coherent about the whole JFK assassination, who actually were the killers, who was involved, what was happening, blah, 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 they got a hold of somebody in the consciousness field that knows nothing about it to bring on their JFK special. And I thought to myself, okay, so what's the point of that? The point of that is you can't have another media person on your show that tells the truth. It's becoming harder and harder for me to get on a show as a guest instead of having my own show because I absolutely refuse to toe the line. I won't fall for what they have to say. And I only bring people on my show that I believe are telling the truth as they know it. I can't say that all the contactees on my show are, they got it all together and everything's perfect and they're not telling, made up stories. I don't know, but they come on and they tell their experiences. And I think it comes from their heart. And I think that's super important that we all understand everybody has a different type of experience in this consciousness UFO alien contact that we're having. And I think that's great, but I'm certainly not going to bring on people that I believe have been part of the problem for a very long time, that have big names in the community. People ask me all the time, why didn't you have so-and-so on? Why didn't you have so-and-so on? And whatever. And I'll say, I won't even let them near me, let alone have them on a radio show, because I'd be part of the problem. I'm not going to be part of the problem. So I think I'm getting a reputation as a hard-nosed person that wants to tell the truth. And, whether it's good for me or bad for me, I don't know. And I don't honestly care, as long as I know that at the end of the day, I can look myself in the mirror and say, I did the right thing, as best I could. So, So there you are. Anyhow, that's just me kvetching here.
Yeah, well, and it's true. I mean, if you people had been in the room when we had that meeting where you did part of the interview was on the record, taping, and part of it was maybe for posterity in case we all disappear or whatever. I mean, if people had been in that room and seen what was going on and who we were talking about, and the fact that everybody was on the same page, and I didn't know this until you guys contacted me at Laughlin, that somebody else had done this research for 25 years and had come up with all the same names as me, and so I know like Desta was with me. She'd come from Winnipeg. And she was, when I asked her after, like, so what do you think? And she was like, wow. It's like, like you suddenly walk into a meeting where, everybody's describing who's in, who's out, what's actually going on, people who have actually confirmed that they're part of a method to spin the story and to keep it away from classified material. Some of these stuff where we're taping this and it's not going to be released, but the fact that everybody seems to be on the same page, and so that's why I'm kind of excited with the conference. That I was really shocked when you guys approached me, and I suddenly found out that wow, I mean I'm not the only person that's come to this conclusion and with the same names.
Exactly, and Grant, the real issue is that you and myself and the other people involved in all this research, I call it the real research. We're doing the real thing here. Yeah. And the problem we're facing again is the mind control, because they've got people just hooked on these fake UFOs flying in the sky, YouTube videos. They've got everybody walking around going, "Oh, do you think it's real?" Well, just like you said earlier in the show, the guy got up and said UFOs are real, and nobody paid any attention. See, right. How mind controlled is the UFO community, where they couldn't all have just said, "Okay, game over. He admitted it's all real. We can all go back to work now." Yeah. The problem they've got is if the UFOs are real and the aliens are real and all this is really going on, it isn't as much, I think, what you were talking about, how, people will freak out and, whatever. I think it is they won't have control over us anymore to earn their money for them, because we're a slave population.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the minute
Sure. Yeah. It's a complex thing. Like when I wrote Managing Magic, I listed 64 reasons. And when you start looking at really in detail, I mean, there's all sorts of reasons, paranoid, real, unreal, that they are determined to keep spinning and keep this thing the way it is.
Oh, absolutely. What would happen to us all, just like you said about Reagan, if we all had to join together? What would that do to the evil plot that run, or evil group, or the Bilderbergers, or whoever runs this planet? And even if they are evil reptilians, they're still making money. See, everybody laughs at me when I say this. I said, "What would an evil reptilian need money for?" They don't need money. Yeah. So if you're looking beyond the money, and if this is a real deal, if the queen is an evil reptilian or whatever,
don't forget the only reason why she's alive is because the conspiracy crowd says she feeds off of virgin blood.
Oh, yeah. I mean, see, all this stuff is great, but the reality is, if you follow the money, like I always tell people, she's probably not an evil reptilian. She's probably a Satanist or a demon person or a witch or, something like that. And, that's probably their gig. On their religious beliefs or whatever it is. But, it's all about money. In the end, if you look at it, why would you need to control the population through its money? Why don't you just make everybody a slave and make them do what you want? If you're an evil reptilian, that's what you really need, like the Anunnaki. Supposedly they're having all these people dig gold in mines. They didn't give them pay. They didn't need to give them pay. They just fed them and kept them alive, I mean, there's something wrong here when people say, "Oh, they're all evil reptilians." Well, I think that's part of the mind control. I think they're trying to keep us all just stupid as to what's really going on here. And there may be another whole piece to this. You were talking about the portals. I am a true believer, because back when I was like 8 or 9 years old, I don't know if you remember this story, Grant, no. I had a house appear in front of me that I pinned down. Well, it's not as long and complicated, but it is. Basically, I pinned it down to 18th century England. Mm-hmm. So, and it appeared to me in 20th century Portland, Oregon. And it was a whole house and the whole bit. I mean, it's basically kind of like that Whitley Strieber story where he drove through a town that was in a different time period. Oh, I'd had this whole thing appear to me. And anyhow, long story short, I think that this whole parallel dimension or dimensional time space with other types of beings, it's truly the answer going on here. I think it's much more important than the outer space beings that are coming here. I do believe we have a secret space program. I believe the secret space program has been out there for years, and I think they're defending us against the 3D reality type of aliens that do come here and maybe do want to harm us. I don't know. But that's my guess. But I think the guys that are coming through these portals or these dimensional rifts or the ranch, the Sherman Ranch, that kind of place. You heard about all the portals opening there and the creatures coming through, right? Yeah, I think that's the real key here. I think that is what they're really afraid, that we find out that they may have been sending people there, or we may have an agreement with people in a different dimension. Or better yet, are you guys ready for this? There's a new TV show coming on Starz called Counterpart. Have you seen this with J.K. Simmons as the lead guy? And
I was contacted by somebody on the show.
Oh, really? Were you? Can you tell us a little bit about that? I mean, it's amazing.
Well, it involves the portals, and that was before I even believed in portals. I'm a Johnny-come-lately to portals, because I was talking to Kevin Albert, the guy in Hollywood that was doing the thing for Pandolfi, and that's when the portal thing started. Dan Smith started leaking the portal thing, and I said to him, this portal thing is nonsense. He said, no, the portal stuff is real. But before I had that conversation with him, this guy contacted me, and he was, I can't remember his position was, but he said, I think this is drip, drip, drip. I think they want this out. And that's why I was saying before, there's 6 shows last year that have portals. Like Twin Peaks has the portal thing they introduced.
Exactly.
And it's like this is this indirect sort of thing that they're sort of dropping this thing out there. And then I got into, why they're doing this and what it is, but I didn't believe any of this stuff. I thought it was total nonsense, and that's why I was so interested in the Zendra thing. Well,
yeah. See, that's where I wanted to go next. Can you explain to people what the Zendras are, and then you and I will have a little tete-a-tete about that.
Yeah. Well, I started with the portal thing, and I'm chasing Pandolfi and his wife around with their story about her and the pod and, going to another world, coming back and all this kind of stuff. And then I have the Charlie Red Star book is released, and that's when I get the message from the alien. I'm going to Mount Shasta, and I get this message that Antarout alien knows I'm coming, and there's going to be a program sighting on the Saturday night. And I'm thinking, I got the message from Chris Bledsoe before about from aliens, and I knew it turned out to be a book. So I figured, well, I should listen. But basically, what was happening was that Charlie Red Star, the woman that got it published for me, wanted to do this thing about Rama, and I had no interest in Rama. I sort of had an indirect notion that they were these contactees. But what it is basically, to make a long story short, it's like a CE5, but it's nothing like a CE5. So what they do is they have these antennas. Every group has these antennas, and what happens...
And now, let's explain it. The antenna is a person that is got psychic abilities and can communicate with these extraterrestrial beings. Okay?
Yeah, and they're receiving messages. So they're not sending, they're just receiving. And they use automatic writing. That's their standard thing. So these people will get a message that, in my case, there was two antennas who got a message that my event would take place at 9:33 at night on Mount Shasta, and that's exactly what happened. 9:33 is when this event happened. So this is an important part. So it's not like a CE5 where you set up lights, you set up lasers and sounds, and you sit there and meditate and try to pull the aliens in. It's basically, it's already been predicted when this thing's going to take place and where it's going to take place. So I suddenly, when I went there and when the event happened to me, that's when I interviewed Paula Harris, because I had heard that she had been through this Zendra, where in 2014 there's 10 witnesses that actually go into this thing. This thing forms. It's this bluish white smoke coming off the ground, or mist coming off the ground. They have to hold hands till they get inside the mist, and then they let go, and there's a 10-foot-tall alien standing there with these 2 smaller aliens beside it, then these little tiny aliens that are playing peekaboo behind the trees, maybe 4 feet high, but they're not grays. And I said to Paula, I'm taping this whole thing. And then she said, oh, all the other people are here. And I said, really? So I started going to these Latino people who can barely speak English, and I'm saying, you were in this Zendra thing? And they go, yeah, I was in it. What'd you see?
Yeah.
Oh, I saw this 10-foot alien, and he had this medallion, and these sparks were coming off the medallion, and they're all going, yeah, the sparks. And I'm going like, I can't believe this. I've been in this 42 years. I've never heard anything like this in my life. And then suddenly realized there was 2014, 2015, this happened. Both times had 10 witnesses inside this thing 20 feet away or 20 yards away from this alien. And then I realized there was one.
And I got to interject something now.
Yeah.
Why wasn't that the top story on the New York Times?
Exactly. Well, I think it was.
This is the part I'm talking about. You guys, it's all mind control. They don't want you to know this stuff is real. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. And so that's where I said that's what happened with me in '75. I said, well, why is nobody investigating this? And when I saw this, I went, this is the most amazing story I've ever seen in my life. I just can't believe. And then I heard that there was one in 1995 at Mount Shasta had this what's his name, Joe Vallejo, who was a 747 United Airlines pilot who was inside this Zendra. There was 49 people went through, and then Sixto Paz, the guy that started this whole thing back in the 70s, shows a video of Uruguay 2009, 125 people go through this Zendra thing, and I start pulling the files, and all these people are reporting, and I brought them actually to the conference. I got like 100 pages of documents of people who were in the Zendra talking about the messages they got and stuff like this, and I'm going like, I can't believe this. I mean, I was totally clued out, absolutely nothing. And it fit into this whole idea of, because they're talking about interdimensionality, consciousness. It's the same portal thing. It's this idea that if this gets out, then the idea of the physical universe, this game, set, match is over. I mean, this idea that we're nuts and bolts and stuff. And so that's why I was so interested in the story. And I live this 24/7 now. But now you're getting the counterintelligence stuff, or the people are starting to play into the thing where they'll pick up a video, like from one of the events, they'll pick up a video and say, "Oh, this is a balloon. This whole thing's a hoax." And it's like with the Paula Harris thing, I say, like,
when did that happen? That was a couple days ago, wasn't it?
This afternoon was the one where, and these people I don't even think you realize, because you get this thing in the UFO community. People want to play the skeptic. I'm a skeptic and I'm rational and stuff. And this is a balloon and that's a kite and all this sort of stuff. And they're playing right into the government.
Exactly.
So all these websites or these Facebook sites where these people are doing this, they're playing right into counterintelligence by doing this kind of stuff. And it's like, well, what happened to the 125 witnesses? Forget about, because these videos, you know what it is with the videos, that these people, the guys that are running it, whether it's Ricardo Gonzalez or whether it's Sixto Paz or stuff, they do not take any videos. They absolutely do not. I mean, when you see how easily people are manipulated and how simple it is to counter these stories, and everybody just jumps on the bandwagon because everybody wants to play the thing where, you know, we're smart and we're scientific, and so somebody yells hoax, and man, it's just like heading for the doors. Everybody just you know, heads. They can't get out fast enough.
Yeah. Well, I did a little not to. Your presentation was the best presentation, I think, by far, along with Sixto and gosh, I can't remember his name right now. Enrique, yeah. You guys had amazing presentations, but I went back out into the lobby right after you guys were all done speaking, and guess what? People weren't talking about how you had just changed their lives and their perspective on everything. They were talking about, you know, I saw a UFO or, you know, whatever. So the problem we've got is that there is a point where people in the community stop looking at the microcosm of themselves and their experience and start realizing. Now, I don't know how many years this takes, because it didn't take me long, but it took me a while to figure out what it was. Once you start looking outward and looking at the whole thing as a big picture instead of a microcosm of, oh my God, look, you know, this happened to me, which is where, by the way, they want to keep you. They want to keep you always looking at it from your perspective instead of looking at it from everybody else's perspective as a whole. And that's the deal here, folks. If you can get away from the fact that, hey, they were in my bedroom last night, and what am I going to do, and who's going to help me, and how do I figure it all out, and where do I play in, and here's the best part, which comes from our TV show about what's the people of Earth. I love it. You are special. You know that. Did you watch that?
No, I haven't.
Oh my God, Grant, you've got to watch it. I die. Every time I watch it, I die laughing. I swear to God, you can't get me off the floor. I'm laughing so hard. It is the best UFO contactee show out there, because what it's really doing is it's slapping all the contactees in the face and saying, stop thinking of yourself as, you know, little messiahs or being special or that you're super important. What is important is that you find other people who are having this too, and you go all out there together and make sure you figure it out as a group and make sure that the experiences happen like Sixto's doing and things like that happen, so that we can get enough of us all doing this so they can't ignore us anymore. I mean, that's the real case here, is that if we can get enough people to come out like that and stop being in fear of what anybody can do to you or thinks of you, or, you know, whatever, you know, if you can get over that point, then we're going to be able to change how this is all run. And the Stephen Greers, you know, sorry to say, will go by the wayside. There'll be another experiencer. They won't be a guru anymore. We've got to get it to that point where we don't have gurus. We only have groups of people changing how other people see us. I mean, that's really the issue here.
And people do have that fear thing. I know there was a bunch of people from one state, I won't say what state it was, but they wanted to come out and tell their sort of encounters with Zendras and stuff. And then I guess they heard about me, so then they started Googling, and of course Pandolfi comes up and all this stuff. And then they all run for the door like they're all going to get killed. And it's like, it's like they suddenly figure I'm working for the government, and I'm saying, no, if it weren't for me, you wouldn't even know there was the government doing this stuff. I mean,
exactly.
But that fear thing is a big thing for people to overcome. Is that the ego gets in there and they see it like Santa Claus, like what are they here to give us and what are we going to get out of this? And the fear takes over, and it's very hard to change people once they get into that fear mentality.
Hey guys, I got a quick question here for you, if you don't mind.
Oh, I'm sorry. Were we supposed to have a break?
No. I've just been sitting back and listening and having a good time here. So thank you. You're making my job easy tonight.
Oh, good. I'm glad. So what's the question, Dave?
Well, you mentioned, that Dr. Stephen Greer was a player in this, and then Corey Goode was a player, and then Tom DeLonge came off the sidelines to be the next player in this. What is the timeline for these so-called players that are supposed to expose the UFO field from the government, like you guys are saying?
Gosh, Grant, that's a good question because I can't remember them all. They're, every year or so they throw somebody out to see if they'll stick to the wall, for any length of time. And if they don't stick, they just disappear in a month or two. And then, like Corey Goode lasted about almost 2 years. Like I told the story where I went down to Conscious Life Expo 2 years ago and met him for the first time. And he'd already been warned about me, apparently, because I went to talk to him, and he looked me in the eye, and he said, oh, get a hold of my people, and then turned around and walked away. So, I'm already chopped liver to Corey. But bottom line is I'm standing in the line waiting to go see his presentation with a friend of mine, and I didn't know what he was about or anything. And I said something about how he's probably the next, disinformation person or whatever. I can't even remember what I said, but Grant, you're going to love this. So the person in front of me turns around. She's with I think she's with her boyfriend or somebody. And she turns around and says to me, oh, you're just a hater. You shouldn't be in line. You should not see Corey Goode because you won't even understand what he's talking about. And I'm like, huh? And then at the same time she's going off on me, the guy behind me says, yeah, you shouldn't be in line. You're not consciously aware enough to be in this line. You can't watch Corey Goode. No, you should be allowed in the room. And boy, okay, Grant, that lasted about 3 seconds with me. I'm ready to start fighting verbally, right? So my friend grabs my arm and pulls me out of line and says, nope, you're not going after them. We're leaving. Because he was afraid I was going to make a big stink there in line. So, but that was my first introduction to the mentality of the people that were following him around in the beginning. I mean, these guys were like Kool-Aid drinkers. I'm telling you, the CIA experiment down in Guyana with Jimmy Jones has absolutely taken over the United States. They have done it to us all. We're all drinking the Kool-Aid, at some point or another.
Yeah, I saw that lineup. I was going to go to the event, and I think it held 600 people in that room or whatever, and then these people are all really upset. There was still 100 people in line, and they'd oversold tickets. And it's like, we paid for these tickets, and we went in, and it's like, well, there's no room. And so they actually had a second event after that, but that's when I didn't even realize who he was. It just
exactly
lineup. Spiraling down this hallway and down that hallway, and it's like, what the heck? There was 40 people at my lecture. I was doing consciousness, and there was 40 people. Nobody even could care less.
I was doing mind control, and there were 40 people in mine, too. I get it. Isn't it amazing? I mean, see, this is what Grant and I fight all the time, you guys. It's just, I don't know how to describe it to people, but thank God Grant and I are smart enough. We just look at it and we laugh because we've been doing it for so long that we know the game. And I predict to people, and they're always amazed, Grant. They think I'm the best psychic in the whole world because I always go, this will fizzle out by so-and-so. This is going to end. This is what's happening because I've watched it happen. There's a huge pattern that people are just not seeing, and they think I'm the best psychic in the whole world. And Melinda and Misha, I swear to God, they're always calling me up, and they're going, you were right all along.
I hate that.
Well, that's why they have to come to your conference because it will, it's going to be truth time where it's not just your average conference where
Oh, none of my conferences. Yeah, as you know, you've been to my conferences and spoken for me. I'll have 20 people in the room before I'll sell out because I refuse to have all the main players. But people leave my conference and they look at me and they go, "Oh my God." That's all they can say to me is, "Oh my God, I never knew any of this stuff." I go, "That's because they won't give it to you at the big conferences because it doesn't sell tickets."
And you haven't written your 7 books yet.
I haven't written my 7 books. I don't have time. Oh my God, it's just like I live and breathe this behind you as well, and I've told you, you and I were stuck in the car together during traffic in the San Francisco Bay Area for like an hour and a half getting to our friend's house up in Sonoma. And, basically I'm on the same mission you're on. Somehow they blessed us both with, this job. And I think our good friend Misha and Melinda and all those guys, they're also on the same mission. And Misha Johnson, I got, bless her heart, she has all those groups for all those people trying to help them, escape the brainwashing that's happened to them, basically. And it's a tough life to live, Grant. But it's
a valuable thing. It's better than, being like these other people who are sort of wandering around in a daze that have no idea what's going on. At least we sort of realize what's going on, and it gives you some value to what you're doing.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, I there are days like, I was laughing when I was listening to you earlier, how you said, I wanted to get out of this,
Many times.
There's no escape for us, I'm telling you.
That's right.
I just sit here daily and I dream about the day I get my farm with my goat. That's all I care about now. It's like, when are they going to let me go? I feel like I'm in military service and I've got to get my discharge, And
then I thought I was out of it again. I had written the Managing Magic, and then you guys approached me at Laughlin, and that's when I think I mentioned in my lecture, it's like, I thought I was out. Now it looks like I'm dragged back in again because you guys had all this new material that I'd never seen, and it linked up with my material, and I'm going like, I can't believe this. This is like unbelievable. Now I'm going to have to go back in and do some more writing or do something to bring this out because it was just so spectacular, that meeting we had in the hotel room. It was just like, it was almost like a spy movie thing where, these people are quietly gathered in this room and the tape recorders are going and people are sort of, telling these stories that nobody's ever heard before. It's just like, wow.
Yeah, we did have a good time. And I want to very emphasize this for all the agencies that are listening. There are 20 copies of everything, and I have sent them out to all the right people in the universe, okay? If anything happens to any of us, those are going to be released, and you guys are going to wish it hadn't happened.
It's like Stephen Greer's Dead Man's Trigger, right?
Exactly. I laugh every time I hear about that because the reality is they gave him cancer and they gave his wife cancer, and I think they also gave him the cure. I think they said, this is just my opinion, you guys, okay? I'm just throwing this out there. They said, you're talking too much. You might be doing you're going off on your own there, Stephen. So here's a little cancer. So now, we'll give you a cure, but, you got to start following the party line again. It plays right into what you said about him saying he had to report back because I seriously think they gave him that cancer, and I think they cured him. So... who are all these guys reporting to? And I even wonder about some of the other people in our community that we've known for a long time. I really do.
That's that meeting that we had in the hotel room. I was just shocked when I heard some of these names because these are friends of mine. And I said, okay, if this person said that they were told this by this person, okay, I'm outing the guy. I mean, I don't give you care as my friend. It's like people should know that these people are actually in the game and that they're spinning the story.
Yeah. Well, the other thing I wanted to bring up with you, and I'm sorry to keep you for this whole hour, and David, I'm sure
I'm just hanging out. Don't mind me.
You're salivating. You're like salivating in the corner. Doty, I'm still kind of like, what are we going to do about this Doty thing? Because I think he was trying to tell us a lot of the truth in that interview.
Well, that's what I thought because I always, I've known him for years, and he was always painted as a disinfo guy. Yeah. And then when I saw the full interview that Stephen had done with him, I'm thinking, like, he's right about this. I mean, for example, he said we actually had a lot of nuclear weapons at Kirkland Air Force Base, and I've been saying this for years, and everybody just totally ignored me, and I thought, wow, and then suddenly this girl told me she was on a chat board with him, and then I heard Linda's interviewing him, and it's almost like, and then I heard that he was part of Ron Pandolfi had sent this Kevin Elber guy to talk to him for the documentary, and it's like, wow, they're bringing this guy back out. And then it occurred to me, there was the story that was told, that Kit Green told the story. I don't know if you know the story. After UFO Cover-Up Live in '88, the day after, there was this big meeting happening, counterintelligence, the director of counterintelligence, CIA, and Pandolfi was there, and the guys from the Roswell Report, these, I can't remember the guys' names, these guys that wrote the Roswell Report were in there. And that's when Kit Green came out and said that Doty had passed the lie detector test. And I knew they were close friends. And so then when I started to see these things happen, and then Kit Green tells the story that Richard Helms had this secret meeting with him in the back alley, this sort of thing with the code word and all this sort of stuff, and that he had said, believe everything Richard Doty says about UFOs. And that's this confusion thing where I'm going like, well, maybe he is putting some stuff out. And it was just so bizarre that suddenly he's on the scene. He's been out of the scene since 1987, and 20 years later, here he is, and he's going to go coast to coast.
Yeah, he's never been out. I think he just went dark for a while and monitored everything.
Yeah. And now he's out there, and he's talking to everybody, and I'm passing questions through to him and stuff like that, and it's just so bizarre how it's like that's where people say, that it's quiet. Like they're saying at the conference, nothing's happening. I'm saying, oh my goodness, it's exactly the opposite. It's like there's not enough hours in the day to keep up with all the stories that are coming out and the people that are coming out. It's just so bizarre.
Just keeping track of everybody's double speak.
Oh yeah,
exactly. I'm telling you, Grant, you know what I go through. I listen to everybody. I listen to everything they say, and then I have to go through and I have to figure out, okay, was that true? Was that a lie? Was this a truth? Was this a lie? It's like, what are these guys doing? And the only way you can do that is if you have enough, if you're not in the fear base, if you're not thinking about yourself, and you've listened to everything else everybody's ever said in the community. Yeah. And you just got to put it all together. And I think that's where your research, my knowledge, our other friend's knowledge that was in the meeting, and, her counterpart, and I will say it to her, they have really been at this for a very long time. That's when her and I got together the very first time. She was absolutely amazed at what I had taken into my brain. We didn't stop talking for 12 hours the first time we met. Wow. And it's just simply because she never run into anybody else who was looking at it the same way that she was.
Yeah, that's what surprised me, is that everybody seemed to be on the same page in there.
Yeah. See, and there's very few people in our community that look at it from this angle. You know what I'm saying? They just overgloss it, and they're off into their own thing. I mean, there were some amazing presenters at Laughlin this year. I think, wasn't Schmidt there, and a lot of other people. I mean, they're really on to different things, but the importance of them is just dwarfed by the area that you've gotten into and that we've gotten into also. It's just, it's an amazing thing what we're following here. And if people only could just wrap their heads around the fact that this is a huge disinformation campaign kept to keep you like a mushroom in the dark and following the little bits of manure they give you to keep you just looking down all the time. And it's really a bigger picture thing that people got to start paying attention to.
That's why we need your books. We need your 7 books.
Well, my 7 books. Yeah. I mean, seriously, folks, disclosure's already happened, as Grant knows. Aliens are real. We all know that. And now we know that time travel and portals and other dimensional time space are a reality. And the government's been hiding that, too. We know this is all real. The question is, when are they going to let us know what's really going on, and how are they going to leak it out to us? And here's the great part for them, Grant. Everybody under 40 doesn't even have an idea what's happened to the last 40 years of ufology, so they think everything anybody jumps in and says is new, and they have no idea what's going on. So they get to play with a clean slate every 40 years or every 25 years. Yep. This whole Tom DeLonge thing is just another thing that says, now we're going to get the people under 40, and we're going to control their narrative of the UFO community.
That's right. And that's why they got to come to your conference, because then they got to get the truth.
Yeah, well, yeah, I hope so. I hope a lot of people show up this year. No, seriously, Grant, because your work is super, super important. I've told you that for years. And when you're going down the music alley, I thought that was very intriguing because it already all touches on consciousness. It all touches on what kind of communication we're getting from different levels and different types of beings out there that are actually taking care of us in some cases. I mean, it kept me alive. I don't know about you, but
that's where I think that you and I have a difference. That I've just basically followed what I think is some sort of direction. Like I don't think any of this happened by accident. I'm sort of getting direction. I think you're getting the same.
I am,
and I got to cut it off. I got to cut it off right there, guys. Lorian, Grant, you guys hold on. I'm going to wrap this thing up if you don't mind, because it's that time. Grant, okay. Grant, that was a long few minutes. That was a long few minutes. You guys hold on here. I want to say thank you so much to Grant Cameron. He said he was only going to stick around for a couple of minutes in hour number 3. Went the distance. Lorian Fenton, an amazing woman whom I so much respect. Tomorrow night on the program, the SOR Paranormal Roundtable. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm bringing in some friends. We're going to go over the month that was. I hope you join us as well. We got Mr. Ron Bumblefoot THAL rocking in the background with Little Brother is Watching. Bumblefoot is the official music of Spaced Out Radio. He rocks us in and out of every single show. I want to say thank you to my great team for helping me put this together. From our legendary dulcet tones of Bob Davis, who intros me into the show, Amy Martin, Michael W. Hall, Eric Markham, Tim Doyle, Jolene Lammers, Catherine James, doing a great job, all of you. But most of all the thanks goes to you listening at home, in your cars, wherever you may be. Those of you on Twitter at hashtag Spaced Out Radio and in the chat rooms, thank you so much for being with us, sharing this show, and making it bigger and better every single day. Because together, my friends, we own the night. I'll talk to you in 21 hours from now. Mr. Bumblefoot, we need a favor. We need you to take us home. Have a good one. Good night.